They were ready to sell her. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, literally sell her. In a ballroom glittering with diamonds, Arya Vance stood like a ghost in her own father's empire, dressed not to shine, but to disappear. And just when the night was about to swallow her whole, a man with ice in his eyes crossed the room, kissed her in front of everyone, and destroyed the deal they thought she'd never discover. He didn't save a girl. He declared war on a dynasty. And from that moment on, the bastard daughter they mocked was no longer invisible. She was untouchable.
Eels. Case file. Vance Arya. Illegitimate offspring of a magnate, her existence deemed a familial disgrace. At a society gala, a high-stress social environment, subject Vance demonstrated established patterns of self-effacement as a survival tactic. Eels. This behavior was disrupted by the introduction of a new variable, a male subject exhibiting traits of a high-functioning predator who fixated on her as a target of acquisition. One dance, one interaction, Eels. One decision. The catalysts for systemic collapse. For those observing the coronation of the marginalized, the following documentation is critical. A record of this case study's geographical dissemination is requested. Eels. The Hartley Grand Ballroom presented as a carefully curated toxic environment. Eels. This initial assessment by subject Vance upon entering the gilded venue is noteworthy, given a history of conditioning to devalue her own cognitive processes. She retained these thoughts nevertheless. They were kept as a form of internal record, Eels, concealed and compartmentalized, a common coping mechanism in victims of prolonged psychological abuse. The chandeliers, massive and oppressive, created a fractured light pattern on the floor below. Eels. The population density was approximately 300 individuals, all displaying markers of extreme wealth, engaged in performative social laughter. The auditory stimulus was a soft Viennese waltz, Eels, music engineered to evoke a sense of established power and tradition. Eels. Olfactory analysis registered scents of roses and champagne, with an underlying, more acute note the subject identified as money. This synesthetic association is significant. She performed a self-conscious smoothing of her attire. Eels. The garment, a modest navy blue dress, was selected for her by her stepmother, Vivian, with a clear psychological intent of social effacement akin to selecting a burial shroud. "You'll wear this one," Vivian had mandated. Eels. Reinforcing a clear demarcation. The other dresses are for the family. The implication was clear. Despite her lineage from Gregory Vance, the man across the room, the subject was classified as an outsider. Eels. He made no eye contact upon her entry. This is a consistent pattern of public disavowal. A waiter offered champagne. His gaze was analytical, attempting to categorize her social standing. Eels. An unaccompanied female at such an event is an anomaly, either a figure of immense power or one who is profoundly displaced. No, the subject declined. "Thank you," a minor act of agency. Eels. She observed the server's subsequent interaction with an emerald-clad female who accepted a glass without acknowledgement, a textbook display of objectification. This environment operates on a simple binary. You are either a person or an object, Eels, and the boundary is perilously thin. Eels. Subject Vance was aware of her classification for the evening. "Oh my God, is that her?" The query was delivered as a stage whisper, a vocalization engineered for maximum audibility and public humiliation. The subject did not turn, Eels, but shifted her gaze laterally. The speakers were three females in their early 20s, including her half-sister, Celeste Vance. One conspirator expressed surprise. "I didn't actually think Vivian would let her come." Eels. Celeste's response was delivered with a tone of casual cruelty, Vivian's being generous. She said the girl needed to see how the real world works. Eels. She framed the act as a life lesson. The group's soft laughter was a form of social reinforcement. The subject's hand tightened on her clutch, knuckles showing white, a physiological stress response. She then consciously relaxed the muscle tension, Eels, an ingrained regulation technique taught by her deceased mother. Never let them see your hands shake. The maternal voice remains a powerful internal directive 4 years post-mortem. Don't stand in the middle of the room like that, Eels. Celeste commanded as she passed, invading the subject's personal space with her perfume. It's embarrassing for everyone. The subject complied, a conditioned response, retreating to the ballroom's periphery where shadows offered concealment. Eels. She stood by a marble column, attempting a controlled breathing exercise. 4 counts. Hold 4. Exhale 4. A therapeutic from a discontinued treatment. A secondary medical subject. Marcus then entered her field of vision. He was approximately 50 years of age, with silver hair and artificially white teeth. He was identified as a business associate of her father. His approach was predatory. Heels. It is Miss Vance, isn't it? He confirmed, his eyes performing a slow, objectifying scan of her body, which induced a palpable distress response. You have your father's eyes. Thank you, Arya responded, her tone flat, effectless. He did not retreat. Heels. Gregory didn't tell me you'd be here tonight. She explained it was a late decision. He moved closer, the smell of scotch and cologne becoming prominent. How old are you now, sweetheart? 21, 22? 23, she stated. 23. Heels, he repeated, as if assessing a commodity. And still single, she gave no response. Well, he continued, encroaching further and placing a hand on the column above her. Heels. If your father isn't introducing you around, maybe he just doesn't know who to introduce you to. I could make some recommendations. His hand descended the column, his knuckle making deliberate contact with her bare shoulder. Heels. The subject exhibited a classic freeze response. I'm fine, thank you, she said, her volume low. Are you? He countered smilingly. Because from where I'm standing, you look a little lonely. I said, I'm fine. Her voice hardened. Heels. He perceived the shift. The flirtatious facade dissolved, revealing narcissistic injury, a common reaction in such profiles when faced with rejection. You know, he said, his voice lowering. Heels. Girls in your position should be a little more grateful when someone takes an interest. You don't exactly have options, do you? Her jaw muscles tensed. She prepared a verbal retort. The subject maintains an internal catalog of responses, Heels, pre-formulated and categorized by their potential social cost, a clear indicator of long-term adaptation to a hostile environment. She was preempted. The ballroom's social climate suddenly shifted, Heels. It began as a subtle change in the collective focus of the crowd, a behavioral ripple indicating the arrival of a new dominant stimulus. Heads turned, Heels. Conversations faltered. A server nearly lost his balance. Then the subject registered an intense, focused gaze. She looked up. On an upper balcony, a man stood observing the room with an air of clinical assessment, Heels, as if calculating the value of every individual present. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a facial structure that appeared chiseled from hard material, prominent cheekbones and a sharp jawline, Heels. His eyes were nearly black from a distance. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie. His entire presentation was anomalous. Heels. There was something fundamentally wrong about him, not in appearance but in presence. He was a wolf in a room of domesticated animals. His profound stillness, his detached calm, his immediate and palpable effect on the crowd, all were aberrant, Heels, and he was aware of it. He was looking directly at her. Are you even listening to me, Marcus? She had forgotten his presence. Sorry, she said, her gaze fixed on the balcony. Who is that? Marcus followed her line of sight, Heels. His demeanor changed instantly. Color drained from his face. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Who is he? Nobody you want to know, sweetheart. Marcus abruptly stepped away from her. Heels. He adjusted his suit jacket, his eyes darting anywhere but toward the balcony. I should go find Gregory. Excuse me. He made a hasty retreat, moving with a velocity that suggested acute fear. This reaction was noted. The man on the balcony inspired fear in Marcus, who just seconds before was behaving as a predator himself. The subject then looked up again. The man was gone. The balcony was empty. She questioned her own perception for a moment. Heels. Then she sensed his presence directly behind her. There had been no auditory cue of his approach. In a marble ballroom with 300 people, he had moved with total silence. Heels. His proximity was announced only by a change in the atmosphere behind her, a shift in density, temperature, and stillness. You looked like you needed rescuing, he said. His voice was low, controlled, compelling subconscious attention. Arya did not turn. Heels. I didn't ask to be rescued, she stated. No, he acknowledged after a beat. You didn't. Heels. Subject displayed an auditory response to the perpetrator's vocal tone. The quality was not amusement. It registered as a colder, more detached state, clinical interest. Upon turning, she misjudged his proximity, Heels, forcing an upward tilt of the head to establish eye contact. His irises presented as dark gray, not black with a surgical stillness. This specific trait has been observed in subjects with a history of multiple homicides, Heels. Its reappearance in a high society setting was a significant environmental anomaly. He then offered a verbal maneuver. Then I apologized, reframing her perception of the preceding event. You didn't rescue me, she corrected. Heels. His counterstatement was telling. He left because he saw me looking. When queried about his motives, he delayed response, instead initiating a facial analysis, not with predatory desire like the previous male Marcus, but with a detached, Heels, analytical inventory. Heels. Arya, the subject, reported the unwelcome sensation of being psychologically exposed, of core vulnerabilities she had concealed for 4 years being identified. The perpetrator then delivered the hook, Heels. Because you were the only person in this room who didn't want to be here. The subject attempted to generalize the statement, a common defense mechanism. The perpetrator dismissed this easily. His mouth formed a micro-expression, a non-smile, Heels, as he clarified the distinction. They want to be seen here. That's different. This precise insight left her without a pre-scripted social response. He then demanded her name. A significant hesitation was noted, Heels. The impulse to provide a false name indicates a heightened threat assessment. Her limbic system was signaling extreme danger, an instinctual drive to disengage from the individual immediately. Heels. She, however, defaulted to her social programming as Gregory Vance's daughter, stating her full name, Arya Vance. A flicker of recognition was observed in his eyes, not of the individual, she assessed, but of the family name, the asset. Heels. He identified himself as Lucien Drave. The name was delivered without title or affiliation, a signifier of extreme stis, where the name alone is sufficient. He remained still, observing her cognitive processing. Heels. While the name itself did not trigger a match in her memory, the secondary environmental data did. The crowd's behavior was a clear tell. A wide, careful perimeter was forming around them. Heels. An older female subject abruptly altered her path to avoid them. A male subject froze mid-action, staring. Heels. The conclusion was inescapable. Lucien Drave was an entity of significant social power. You're not from here, she stated. A non-committal reply. Her follow-up, where are you from, was met with an evasion. Everywhere eventually. Heels. She correctly identified this as a non-answer. He repeated the analytical gaze, framing her as a problem requiring a solution. This state of being objectified was simultaneously repellent and captivating to the subject. He then issued a command, Heels. Not a question, dance with me. She refused, citing 3 reasons: lack of familiarity, aversion to dancing, and finally, Heels. A gesture toward the entire social environment, an acknowledgement that engaging with him would violate her primary directive of remaining unnoticed. Heels. By whom? By anyone. He tilted his head slightly. He looked for the first time genuinely curious. Who told you that? Everyone who matters, then they don't matter. And he held out his hand. It was a big hand, well-shaped, Heels. There was a thin white scar running down the side of his palm, a long one, old. She stared at it. She stared at it for what felt like a long time. While somewhere very far away, the orchestra began a new piece, Heels. And the crowd began to turn toward them in earnest, and she knew. She knew that if she took this man's hand, something in her life would break in a way it could not be mended. She also knew she had nothing left that wasn't already broken. Heels. She accepted his hand. The room exhibited a collective physiological response, an audible intake of breath as hundreds of conversations faltered. Lucien Drave secured his grip and escorted her to the dance floor. The subject, Arya Vance, Heels, whose conditioning dictated she remain on the periphery, was moved directly into the center of attention. He placed one hand on her waist, securing the other. As the music began, Heels, he guided her into the rhythm with a proficiency that suggested experience in environments far more volatile than a ballroom. You said you don't dance, he observed. I don't. You're doing it. Her reply was a classic rationalization of submission. Heels. I'm letting you do it. Heels. This response elicited a near smile from the perpetrator. Who's the tall man? He inquired. Arya did not need to see. That's my father. Ah, Gregory Vance, I know. Heels. The manner in which he spoke the name prompted her to look up. You know him. I know of him. Is that different? It is when it's him. The dance continued. Lucien guided her across the floor, maintaining a perimeter of empty space around them. Heels. Other pairs now populated the floor, but a distinct bubble, a zone of deference, remained around the 2 subjects. Arya could perceive directed observation from all angles. Heels. She was aware of being watched by Celeste, by Vivian, by the Marcus males, who were now recalibrating their predatory assessment of her value. They're all looking at me, she stated, a quiet observation. Yes, I've been in this house a dozen times. Heels. No one has ever looked at me. I know. How? He paused. His hand on her waist adjusted, his thumb applying a single steady point of pressure, a tactile anchor. "Because I've been watching you," he said, "for longer than tonight." Heels. A classic physiological fear response, a sensation of coldness, was triggered. What does that mean? It means we should talk somewhere else. Heels. I don't go somewhere else with strange men. A rational, conditioned response. Smart, then why? Because I'm not offering you somewhere else, he stated. I'm telling you that what I'm about to do will be very public and very loud. Heels. And you should know before I do it that you will not be invisible after tonight. This statement effectively paralyzed the subject. The music continued, but their motion ceased. They remained static, heels, in the center of the floor while 300 individuals feigned ignorance. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. "Whatever you let me." A non-answer. Heels. "You keep saying that because you keep not answering." He then focused his gaze, and for a moment a micro-expression of softening was observed before being suppressed. "Arya," he said, using her name with practiced familiarity. "Tonight," Heels, "one of two things is going to happen." He presented a forced choice scenario. Either you're going to go home with your stepmother in that car, and tomorrow, Heels, a man very much like the one who had his hand on your shoulder an hour ago is going to offer your father a number, and your father is going to take it. Heels. That's one of them. Her respiration ceased. "What's the other one?" "I kiss you," he said, "in front of every person in this room, and tomorrow every one of them knows that you are not for sale." A state of cognitive dissonance occurred. Heels. The subject described it as an internal tilting, a sudden, brutal clarity regarding her situation. Fragmented data points, overheard conversations, her father's recent business associates, the specific dress chosen for her, all coalesced into a single, Heels, coherent picture. She was not a guest. She was the product being showcased. Heels. "How do you know that?" she breathed. "Because I'm a man who pays attention to deals being put together." "And this, what's your offer? What is this, a better deal?" "For who?" The near smile reappeared. "For both of us." Her hand began to tremble. Heels. A delayed somatic response to stress. "And if I say no?" she asked. "Then I walk off this floor and you finish your night the way it was always going to end. You'd let me." "I would." "Why?" "Because I'm not in the business," he said quietly. Heels. "Of collecting women who didn't choose it." A masterful manipulation creating the illusion of agency. Heels. The subject conducted a prolonged visual assessment of the perpetrator, searching for signs of deception. None were found, though their absence was not conclusive proof. The subject understood this interaction was a calculation, Heels, even if its full scope was beyond her. She was capable, however, of clearly visualizing the alternative, the transaction her family had arranged. She weighed a future of predictable, Heels, sanctioned abuse against an unknown future with a more powerful, albeit dangerous, entity. After 4 years of enforced passivity and emotional suppression, the subject was exhibiting profound psychological fatigue. Heels. "Do it," she said, ceding control. The perpetrator's subsequent movements were deliberate, unhurried, raised his hand from her waist to her jaw, a gesture of ownership executed with the confidence of a foregone conclusion. Heels. As he angled her face toward his, he provided a clear interval of time for her to rescind consent. He paused, a fraction of a second, his mouth a breath from hers. This was not a courtesy. It was a final, Heels, silent demonstration of his absolute control over the situation and her response. Heels. Observation confirmed she recognized his gesture as an offered exit. She declined to take it. He then initiated a kiss. It was not tender, nor was it overtly cruel. The action can only be classified as one of claiming. Heels. It was performed without haste and in the full view of approximately 300 observers, including a string quartet and the individual who had functioned as her paternal figure for 23 years. His palm on her jaw registered as warm, Heels. His mouth carried trace elements of smoke and a more complex, unidentifiable compound. Her free hand, acting on an autonomic impulse, rose to his chest. Beneath the fabric of his shirt, her palm registered his heartbeat. Its rhythm was slow. In fact, Heels, it was profoundly slow, like the cardiac rhythm of a subject engaged in a complex mathematical problem. Heels. From a significant distance, a female subject was heard to gasp. From a lesser distance, the sound of breaking glass was recorded. The subject, Lucian, broke contact. Not entirely. His forehead remained pressed to hers for a brief interval. Heels. During this moment, while the entire ballroom fixated on them and the orchestra faltered, he communicated a message in a low decibel, audible only to her. "Breathe, Arya." The patient had been unaware of her own respiratory arrest. She inhaled. Heels. He resumed an upright posture. He disengaged slowly, releasing her one finger at a time, mirroring the deliberation with which he had taken hold of her. Then, without any sign of urgency, he turned to address the assembled subjects. He did not raise his voice. It was unnecessary. "Miss Vance," he stated, "is with me." The subsequent silence persisted for approximately 2 seconds. Then a simultaneous system failure. "What? Who is that man, Gregory? Can you see? Is it Drov?" Arya's knees exhibited severe tremors. She was conscious of the shaking but could not suppress the motor function, nor did she attempt to. Across the room, she located her father. Gregory Vance stood at the top of the staircase, one hand gripping the banister, his facial coloration presenting as white, not the flush of anger or embarrassment, but a bloodless pallor. It was the specific presentation of a man witnessing an asset he possesses being summarily liquidated before him. Beside him, Vivian was engaged in rapid, low-volume vocalization. Gregory registered none of it. His focus was fixed on Lucian, who returned the gaze. An exchange was occurring between them, one Arya could not decode but could sense with the certainty of an impending weather system. Celeste, positioned a few feet away, had placed a hand over her mouth. "Walk with me," Lucian said. "Where to now?" "Away from this room." His hand made contact with the small of her back. Not a push, a presence. "They will converge on our position in roughly 30 seconds. I prefer not to conduct this interaction in front of them." "Do what?" "Explain." She allowed him to guide her. They moved off the dance floor together, through a crowd that parted like an anomaly. Vocalizations were now widespread, some loud, some whispered, some in that sibilant tone females employ when assessing whether to offer pity or enact social destruction. Arya processed none of it with clarity. Her auditory perception had attenuated, her face was hot. Her mouth retained the sensory imprint of his. A server nearly lost control of a tray. Lucian stabilized it without shifting his gaze. They arrived at the ballroom's periphery, at a secondary door concealed by a velvet rope. Lucian unclipped it with one hand, opened the door, and revealed a narrow, dimly lit, and quieter hallway. The music was instantly muffled. He let the door close. The resulting silence was absolute. Arya turned toward him. The tremor in her hand was still present. She made no effort to conceal it. "What?" she said. "Have you done?" "What I stated I would do." "No. No." "What have you done? Do you have any comprehension?" She pressed a hand to her forehead. A single, short, humorless laugh escaped her. "Do you understand what my life becomes tomorrow?" "Yes." "Say it." "Tomorrow," he stated, "every individual in this city who classified you as an inanimate object will awaken to discover you are, in fact, a fortress." They will then spend the next week determining its architect. "And who is its architect?" "We will construct it together." "I don't know you." "Correct. I don't trust you." "Also correct." "Then why?" Her voice fractured, a sound she despised. "Why would I do this? Why would I leave that room with you? Why did I just permit that?" "Because," he said quietly, 30 seconds before I approached you, I observed the way you were looking at the exit, and I knew. You had already made the decision, long before my arrival, that you would not be returning home tonight as the same person who walked in." Arya stared at him. "I was going to leave," she whispered. "That's what I was thinking. I was going to leave and walk to the train station." "I'm aware. You don't know that." "I do." "How?" He offered no verbal response. It wasn't required. His stillness provided its own kind of answer, and she lacked the psychological energy to contest it. Down the hall, a door opened. A male subject in a dark suit emerged. Not staff, not a guest. Another category entirely. His build was formidable. He looked at Lucian, gave a single nod, and reported, "Car is waiting out back, sir." "Thank you, Mr. Volov." The man, Volov, did not withdraw. He maintained a polite distance down the hallway, hands clasped before him. Arya assessed him. "He's yours," she stated. "Yes, you had a car prepared." "I had a car prepared for myself, or for either of us." Lucian's gaze held hers. "Contingent on your decision." Behind them, through the ballroom door, Arya could hear the volume of voices escalating. Her father's voice, Vivian's voice, other unrecognized voices. They were approaching. Lucian registered the sound as well. He did not look at the door. "Arya," he said, "I will not force your hand." "I need you to understand that. If you wish to return in there, I will open this door immediately. I will claim it was a misjudgment. I will absorb the social consequence. You can go home, and tomorrow you can behave as if none of this occurred. I will not approach you again." "And the other offer? The one my father was going to accept?" He showed no reaction. I cannot prevent that outcome if you are not under my name. The statement landed between them with the weight of a physical object. Under my name, heels. The logical response would have been derision. A physical response would have been appropriate. She should have reminded him of the current century. She did none of these things. Her thoughts were occupied by the image of Marcus's hand on the column, heels. She was thinking of Vivian selecting the navy dress. She was thinking of how Gregory Vance had not met her gaze once all evening, and she was finally processing, with the full weight of a long-held subconscious certainty, heels, that she had been an asset he was prepared to liquidate. She wiped at her face. Heels. There was no moisture. The absence of tears was, on some level, surprising. I want to know one thing first, she said. Ask. Why me? He observed her for a long interval before responding. I had 3 reasons, he said. When I entered this building, heels, 2 of them pertained to your father. 1 of them pertained to you. Which was which? That, he replied, is a protracted discussion. We're having it tonight. Tonight. He studied her, and then slowly that minimal smile reappeared. All right, he said. Heels. Tonight. At that moment, the ballroom door burst open. Gregory Vance came through, his face no longer white but a deep, mottled red. Vivian was just behind him, her mouth already forming words, heels, followed by 2 men in security uniforms whom Arya recognized as her father's employees. You, Gregory began. Heels. He was pointing at Lucian, his finger trembling. You have no idea what you've just done. On the contrary, I do, Lucian said. He hadn't shifted his position. His hand remained at the small of Arya's back. Heels. I've just rendered your daughter exceedingly difficult to sell. The word sell impacted Gregory's face like a physical blow. Vivian snapped, her voice high and strained. Come here this instant. We are leaving. Arya remained stationary. Arya, heels, her father said, his tone altered. It was now quiet, careful. Come away from that man. She looked at him. She looked at the man whose parenting had been neglectful and remote, offering a hand only when cameras were present. Heels. Then she looked at the small clutch in her hand, and the navy dress intended to be her burial shroud, and the tremor in her fingers that she was no longer attempting to control. Did you promise me to someone? She asked. His jaw muscles tightened. Arya, heels, this is not the venue for this. Did you? We will discuss this at home. Did you, Dad? He did not respond. This absence of denial served as confirmation. Arya experienced a sensation in her chest she had not previously catalogued. It wasn't grief, heels. She was familiar with grief. This was colder, older, a latent response that had been awaiting activation. She turned her head and looked at Lucian. Which car, she said, is yours? The black one. Take me to it. Heels. Gregory lunged forward. One of his security personnel moved in tandem. Lucian's man Vulov shifted his position just enough, not as a block, not as a threat, heels, but simply occupying the space between them in a manner that re-emphasized his physical dimensions. Lucian did not break eye contact with her. Are you certain, Arya? No. Do you wish to proceed anyway? Yes. He gave a single nod. Heels. He extended his hand for the second time that evening, and for the second time, Arya Vance took it. They proceeded down the hallway together. Behind them, Gregory Vance was repeating her name, his voice escalating and fracturing. Heels. Vivian was telling him to be quiet. Celeste had materialized in the doorway, hands still pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Heels. Arya did not turn around. She did not look back. Mr. Vulov opened the far door and held it for them. Cool night air flowed in, carrying the scents of rain, gasoline, and the sterile odor of a city after midnight. At the curb, a black car was waiting, long, heels, low, its engine already running. A driver in a dark coat opened the rear door as they came near. Arya paused, her hand on the car's roof. She glanced up for just a moment. The Hartley building loomed above, a structure of gold light and high windows. Heels. In one of those windows on the 3rd floor, she registered what might have been a figure observing her. The data was inconclusive. Miss Vance, Lucian said from behind her. Heels. The subject rejected the label, stating, Don't call me that. When asked for a preference, she could offer none. An expression of acquiescence. The subject entered the vehicle, followed by the perpetrator. The door was secured, the locks engaged. Heels. As the vehicle departed, the lights of the Hartley Grand Ballroom diminished, a receding point of reference to her previous life. It was in this enclosed space, next to a silhouette whose hands bore significant scarring, heels, that Arya Vance processed the irrevocable nature of her decision. A somatic response presented as tremors in her hands. She did not attempt to conceal the symptom. For an extended period, Lucian remained silent, observing the urban landscape. Then, Heels. Without direct eye contact, he began the next phase. The perpetrator stated the existence of a private residence, approximately 20 minutes away. His property. Heels. He noted it contained a guest wing with a lock system under her exclusive control, and that a female associate named Katya would be present. Heels. Her role, he clarified, was to provide any necessary assistance throughout the night. Critically, he established Katya's allegiance, stating, "She answers to you, not to me." He outlined a scenario of absolute autonomy. She could retreat to the wing, Heels, secure the door, and remain undisturbed until morning, with his staff instructed not to even knock. "This is the primary data point I offer for your consideration." Arya's query was direct. "Why are you telling me that, Heels?" His response was a masterclass in psychological framing. "Because," he stated, "you just got in a car with a man you don't know, and I want you to remember that you had a choice even after you stopped having one." Heels. This paradox induced cognitive dissonance, which she vocalized. "I don't understand you," he replied. "You will." A chillingly accurate prognosis. Heels. At that moment, her awareness was limited to the blurred cityscape, the insistent buzzing of her phone, displaying names she was actively rejecting, and the certainty that Gregory Vance was initiating actions that would unearth long-suppressed conflicts. Heels. And she registered, seated beside this individual with his regulated heartbeat and measured tone, his 3 declared motives. That her existence as of the following morning would bear no resemblance to her previously structured life. Heels. She placed her hands in her lap, allowing the tremors to continue unchecked. For the first time in 4 years, Arya Vance registered a cessation of her feelings of invisibility. Heels. The vehicle navigated the city with the fluid dynamics of a blade moving through liquid, unhurried, silent, bisecting intersections where traffic signals cast red reflections on the wet asphalt. Heels. Arya observed the interplay of light and shadow across Lucian's reflection in the window glass. Light, dark, a binary flicker. It was impossible to discern from the flashes whether his focus was on the external environment or on her mirrored image. Heels. The haptic alert from her phone registered for the 9th time. She inverted the device on her lap, avoiding the screen. "You can answer it," Lucian stated. "I don't want to." His counsel was pragmatic. "It'll be easier if you do." Heels. "Otherwise, they'll be on your doorstep by morning." Arya's response indicated a profound psychological break from her past. "I don't have a doorstep anymore." The evenness of her tone was remarkable, even to herself. "My doorstep is his doorstep." Heels. "I just walked away from it." He offered no counter-argument, merely a single nod, a gesture of information received and catalogued. The device vibrated again. She turned it over. 23 missed calls. Gregory, Vivian, Celeste, an unrecognized number, Heels, followed by the same unknown number and then a third. She activated silent mode and placed it face down once more. Heels. "Who's the unknown number?" Lucian inquired. "I don't know, that's what unknown means. Humor me," she complied. The number displayed a 628 area code, unfamiliar, not local, Lucian observed, his gaze indirect. Heels. "It'll be one of the men your father owes." He owes men, a micro-expression, a brief tightening registered on Lucian's jaw. "We'll get to that," he said. "Get to it now." "Area," he began. "You said we'd talk tonight." Heels. "You said I could ask, and I will answer at the house. When you're sitting and you've had water, and you're not still inside the 10 minutes after a man kissed you in public for the first time in your life." Heels. This final clause landed with a peculiar affective impact. "How do you know it was the first time?" He finally made full eye contact. His expression was neutral, not cold. Heels. "Not warm either." "'Cause you haven't touched your mouth once," he said. "An observation of behavioral patterns. Women who've been kissed like that before check at some point to see if their lipstick has moved. You haven't." Heels. "You forgot you had a mouth until I mentioned it." Involuntarily, Arya's hand moved toward her lips. She retracted it immediately. He did not smile. This absence of a smile was for her a source of strange, illogical relief. Heels. A smile would have signaled predatory satisfaction, triggering a hostile response she was not yet prepared to feel. Understanding had to precede judgment. They continued in silence. The destination was not a house. Heels. This was the subject's initial assessment as the gates retracted, and the vehicle proceeded down a driveway of pale gravel, illuminated by the headlights. Heels. The driveway followed a long, gentle curve, vanishing behind a line of dark hedges. A guardhouse was positioned at the entrance. Its sole occupant stood as the car passed but made no signal. Past the hedges, a lawn, and beyond that, the structure itself. Heels. 2 levels of stone and glass, its windows emanating a soft golden light. It was an image of curated domesticity, yet clearly occupied and unnervingly quiet. "How many people live here?" she asked. "Sometimes 9, sometimes 3. Tonight with you, Eels, it'll be 7. It's not a house, Mr. Droff. That's a staff. Call me Lucian. I don't know if I'm going to." "All right." The vehicle decelerated. A woman stood at the summit of the stone steps, hands clasped, hair in a low knot. Eels. Her age was indeterminate, perhaps 50 or older, with a countenance that suggested extensive experience and a cultivated immunity to surprise. She was dressed in a simple dark dress, devoid of any uniform indicators. She projected the aura, Eels, Arya assessed, of an individual who has served in such residences long enough to achieve a form of proprietary status. "Katya," Lucian identified her before the question could be posed. "She runs the house. She's been with me 11 years. Eels. She is not paid to lie to you, and she will not." The driver opened Arya's door. She emerged slowly. The sound of the gravel under her heels and the clean, cold quality of the night air were unexpected sensory inputs, free of urban pollutants. Eels, scented only with grass and the mineral tang of stone. Eels. She adjusted the front of her navy dress, which now felt like an artifact from another identity. "Miss Vance," Katya said, descending the steps. Her voice was low, with a non-specific accent, and unhurried. "Welcome. Your rooms are ready, Eels." She presented a prepared inventory. "There is food if you are hungry, and there is a bath drawn if you are not. I have left both doors to the guest wing unlocked from the inside, so you may lock them yourself in whatever order you like once you are within." Eels. Arya processed the information with a blink. "You had all of this ready, yes. Before I arrived? Yes, he told you I was coming?" Katya's gaze shifted to Lucian only for a moment. "He told me," she stated, "there was a chance." Eels. Arya looked toward Lucian. He remained by the car, hands relaxed, observing the interaction from a position of non-interference. When their eyes met, he gave a minute inclination of his head toward the house. Eels. The gesture was an instruction. "Go in. I'll be along when you want me to be." She ascended the steps with Katya. Internally, the house was unexpectedly warm and exhibited signs of being lived in. Eels. A detail that contradicted her initial sterile impression. It was aesthetically pleasing, certainly. Dark wood floors, aged but high-quality rugs, a long hall dominated by a large black-and-white photograph of an unfamiliar mountain range. Eels. But it was punctuated by human artifacts, a pair of men's boots near the door, still bearing dried mud, a book on a side table, left face down with a broken spine, a half-consumed cup of coffee forgotten by a lamp. The evidence was clear. Eels, people actually occupied this space. Eels. "Your wing is this way," Katya directed. "Through the library, up the back stair. The entire east side is yours." She outlined the subject's autonomy. "You do not need to come out for anything. There is a kitchenette. There is a bath." Eels. "There is a telephone on the wall inside the door that rings only to me if you need anything at any hour. It does not ring to him. Why not to him?" Katya paused, her gaze steady. "Because," she replied softly. Eels. "He does not want you to feel that he is behind every door you open in his house." A physiological response, a tightening in Arya's throat, was noted. "Thank you," she articulated. Katya acknowledged this with a nod. No smile. Eels. They traversed a library lined with books, a mix of old and new volumes from floor to ceiling. Eels. A single leather armchair was positioned near a cold fireplace. They ascended a narrow back staircase and passed through a door into a suite of rooms that caused Arya to halt. The space consisted of 3 distinct areas. Eels. A sitting room with a low couch and 2 deep chairs. A bedroom visible through an archway, containing a bed sized for more than one occupant and curtains the color of wet stone. And a bathroom beyond, constructed of marble and brass. Eels. With a deep tub from which steam and an herbal scent were already rising. On the table in the sitting room was a tray with a covered bowl, bread, a glass pitcher of water containing cucumber slices, and a cup emitting the aroma of chicken broth. Eels. "If you prefer something else," Katya began. "This is fine," Arya interrupted. Eels. "This is more than fine." Katya placed a small folder on the table. "In here," she explained, "are 2 things. A phone, it is new. The number is not connected to your name. Only 4 people have this number. Myself, the driver, Mr. Volkov, and him." Eels. "You may use it to call anyone you wish," she continued. "The second thing is a key. It is to this suite. It is the only key other than the one I carry, and I will not use mine without your permission except in the event of fire." "What if he wants to come in?" Eels. "He will not come in. What if I ask him to?" Katya's mouth shifted almost imperceptibly, not forming a smile but perhaps recalling one. Eels. Then that is your business, Miss Vance, and you will find the key in your hand. Katya's withdrawal is precise. She delivers the final pieces of information. There is one more thing, she stated. Eels. I am to tell you from him that he will be in the library downstairs for the next hour. After that, he will go to his study. Here, a slight hesitation, as if translating a foreign concept. Eels. He says that he will wait as long as it takes, and that if you do not come down tonight, he will not take offense. The subject, Arya, collapses onto a couch. This is a classic somatic response. Eels. The body's neuromuscular system failing under acute psychological duress. Okay, she murmured. Lock the door, Miss Vance. The facilitator, Katya, complies. A click. The subject is now in a controlled environment, a state of induced isolation. Eels. For a significant period, she remains motionless. The suite is silent. Eels. A single auditory stimulus, a pipe ticking, an external sound, a branch against glass, is brief, then ceases. The subject's focus remains on the tray, the artifacts of her new reality. A bowl, a phone, a key. Then, Eels, the inevitable psychological break. She retreats to the bathroom, creating a secondary, more confined space, and initiates a cathartic emotional release. The description is notable. Not a pretty cry, not cinematic, but a purge. Eels. This suggests a raw, visceral trauma response, originating from a deep-seated place of psychic injury. She suppresses the sound with her hand, an action indicative of a learned pattern of concealing emotional distress. Eels. The subject's grief is multifaceted. She mourns her deceased mother, a lost source of guidance. She mourns her own shattered naivete, personified as the girl who believed social disregard was the worst possible outcome. Primarily, Eels. She grieves the confirmation of her father's betrayal, an answer she saw before it was spoken. The crying subsides not from resolution, but from sheer psychological and physiological exhaustion. After a period of stillness, Eels, she performs a ritual of self-reconstitution, washing her face, observing her reflection. The removal of her lipstick is a symbolic act. She isn't just cleaning herself, she is stripping away an externally applied persona, Eels, seeking what she perceives as a more honest self-presentation as she prepares to confront her captor. Eels. The subject looks more authentic, not younger. She returns to the main room and engages with the tools provided. The phone is a control mechanism disguised as a lifeline. It's sterile, a blank slate. The pre-programmed numbers are telling. Eels. Katya, the handler. A driver, logistics, VUL of an unknown variable, and L, just L, a single initial for her captor, an assertion of intimacy and mystique. The subject stares at it, processing the new hierarchy. Eels. She then consumes half the broth and all the water, a calculated intake of sustenance, before descending the stairs. She is already internalizing the environment's rhythms, the sound-dampening rugs, Eels, the dimmed lighting. All subtle environmental manipulations designed to pacify and guide her towards the intended destination. Eels. At the base of the stairs, she pauses. A moment of choice or the illusion of it. She proceeds to the library. The captor, Lucian, is present, but his posture is deliberately non-dominant. He is not at a desk, not performing power. Eels. He occupies an armchair, relaxed, a drink at his side. His jacket is off, sleeves rolled, revealing a tattoo, a detail suggesting an identity outside of conventional power structures. He does not immediately acknowledge her. Eels. A sophisticated tactic that grants her a moment of perceived control in the doorway. She initiates contact. I changed my mind about the water, she says. I'd like something stronger. Wine, whiskey, something else. Whatever you're having. Eels. An attempt to reframe the dynamic to meet him on equal terms. Eels. He closes his book, stands, and pours her a drink from a decanter. A domestic disarming action. His delivery of the glass is notable. He extends it carefully to prevent their fingers from touching. Eels. A calculated gesture of respect for her physical autonomy designed to lower her defenses. Sit, he says, offering another choice, or stand, whatever you want. She chooses the couch opposite him, maintaining maximum physical distance. Eels. The fireplace between them is prepared but unlit, a potent symbol of the situation's cold, contained potential. She samples the drink. The burn is clean. Talk, she commands. For the first time, a flicker of fatigue crosses his face. Eels. A momentary crack in the megalomaniac's mask of effortless control. Eels. All right, he begins. His strategy is to establish a baseline of truth. He recites the known facts of her life, a clinical summary. Father Gregory Vance, company Vance Holdings, stepmother Vivian Ashford, half-sister Celeste. Eels. This serves to validate his credibility as an omniscient narrator. Then he delivers the critical psychological stroke. And you are Gregory's daughter by Eleanor Cassidy, who was a set designer and who died 4 years ago. Heels. The subject's hand grips her glass, a clear stress indicator. Eleanor, she says. No one at that house says her name. His response is the key that unlocks her trust. I know. Heels. How do you know? Because I had people find out. He offers full transparency about his surveillance. I won't pretend I didn't. That's part of what I wanted to say first. This admission of ruthlessness, presented as honesty, Heels, is a classic manipulation tactic. The subject nods. This is a framework she can process. He then exposes the core deception. Her father's business is failing. The secret is kept from everyone, a profound betrayal. Heels. He outlines a debt to a private lender whose name is too powerful to speak aloud, heightening the sense of danger. 5 months from now, that lender expects payment not in currency, but in a consideration. He pauses. Heels. He observes her. Say it, she demands. You. The subject closes her eyes, a physical attempt to block out the confirmation of her commodification. Lucian clarifies the terms, his voice effectless. Not marriage in the old sense. Not officially. Heels. A long engagement. It would have bought your father time. A clinical dissection of the transaction. You were the asset. He even provides details of the planned announcement, grounding the abstract betrayal in concrete reality. Heels. The subject opens her eyes and asks for the man's name. Lucian initially refuses, claiming the name itself is a form of leverage he needs, a direct admission of his need for control. Heels. Not over you, he qualifies. Over him. Say it anyway. He studies her, then complies. Aunt Reyes. The name triggers a somatic memory recall. The subject now recontextualizes a past event. Heels. A seemingly polite man who asked about her reading habits and whose hand lingered on her wrist. What was dismissed as a social misstep is now understood as an act of assessment by a prospective buyer. Her hand begins to shake again. Heels. A delayed trauma response. The realization dawns. So you knew, she says, her focus shifting from the father's betrayal to the captor's complicity. Heels. I knew what was being prepared, Lucian confirms. I have known for about 11 weeks, and you didn't warn me. No, his justification is a textbook example of negating the victim's agency. He argues that any warning would have been futile. Heels. She would either disbelieve him or confront her father, leading to an accelerated, clandestine version of the same outcome. I could not save you with a letter, Arya. I could only save you in a room where everyone could see it happen. Heels. He presents his dramatic public intervention as the sole viable path. He concedes that this was convenient for him, another calculated admission meant to simulate honesty and disarm her anger. Heels. The subject's laugh is not genuine. It's a trauma response, a bitter acknowledgement of his candid manipulation. At least you don't lie about that. I'm trying very hard, he replies, not to lie about any of it. Heels. He even preemptively admits he will likely fail, a move to frame future deceptions as human fallibility rather than calculated strategy. The subject then directly challenges his motives, questioning why he doesn't adopt a benevolent rescuer persona. Heels. His response is the linchpin of his psychological campaign. Because I don't have one of those, he states, a confession of his own pathology. And you'd find out, and you'd leave, and I'd lose you. Heels. This reframes his possessiveness as a fear of abandonment, a deeply manipulative appeal for sympathy, and a foundational statement in the cultivation of a traumatic bond. He then returns to his clinical explanation of his motives. Heels. The first reason is strategic. Gregory Vance's debt is to a rival organization. Arya's engagement to Anton Reyes would form an alliance that strengthens this rival. Lucian's intervention serves to collapse the debt, benefiting himself. Heels. You standing next to me tonight collapses it, he states, explicitly defining her role as a strategic tool. That is the first reason. The second reason is more personal and far more insidious. There is a piece of your mother's life, he says, Heels, that your father has spent a great deal of money to bury. He positions himself as the future agent of this buried truth's revelation, a truth he knows will hurt him badly. He is making himself the sole gatekeeper to her maternal history, Heels, ensuring her continued dependency. Heels. It is imperative you have this information before the event occurs, so that a decision can be made regarding your participation. Her throat constricted. A matter concerning my mother, she stated. Affirmative. The details? Not this evening, Lucien. Heels. Not now. His tone was definitive, yet devoid of cruelty. The evening has been exceptionally taxing. I will not compound one with another in the same hour. I assure you the information will be shared, and soon. Tonight, Heels. It is critical that you are able to rest. Her eyes stung. She suppressed further tears, having already exhausted that emotional reserve. And the third reason, she asked in a low voice. You mentioned one was about me, Eels. He remained silent for a considerable period. I observed you. 6 months ago, he stated, in a coffee house on 5th, the establishment on the corner by the old theater. Eels. You were unaware of my presence. I was seated 3 tables from you. You were engrossed in a book while a man at the service counter berated the barista over an incorrect order. The barista was young, perhaps 19, and on the verge of tears. You rose, Eels. You did not escalate your volume. You approached the counter. You positioned yourself as a barrier between them, and you informed him quite calmly that he was presented with a choice. He could offer the girl an apology, or he could exit the premises, Eels. He could not, however, continue his present course of action. He departed. You then remained there for approximately 30 seconds with your back to me, and I noted the tremor in your hand as it rested on the counter, a detail you concealed from her. Eels. Arya remained motionless. I recall the incident, she whispered. Eels. I settled your bill when you returned to your table. The barista did not inform you. I requested her silence. She stared at him. That is not a rationale, she said. It is an anecdote. Eels. It is the reason I personally walked into the Hartley tonight rather than delegating the task. Lucien did not prearrange your actions in that coffee shop, Arya. I witnessed the event, and my assessment was, Eels. Here is an individual within the Vance household who is fundamentally different from the others. I returned home that night and instructed my people to compile a file on you. That is the point at which I became aware of Anton Reyes, Eels, of your father's liability and of your mother. This is the precise sequence of events. I require you to understand that as well, Eels. I did not construct a snare for you. I discovered you in the midst of one built by another, and I made a conscious decision to enter it myself. The room was utterly still, Eels. Arya pressed the heel of her hand firmly against her eye for a moment before letting it fall. I don't know how to process that statement, she said. I do not require you to process it. Then what was its purpose, Eels? Because I stated earlier that I would attempt to avoid falsehoods. This is that attempt, she exhaled. Understood, he replied. The hearth remained unlit. She focused on it regardless. You stated I have a choice, she said after a time. Eels. That was the specific term you employed in the hallway. Eels. You said I could stand alone and be exploited or stand with you, and your words were, reshape the game. That is what I said. That is not a choice. It is a marketing slogan. A subtle shift in his expression occurred, not quite a laugh. A fair critique, Eels, he conceded. Define the actual choice, in simple terms. He set his own glass down. He inclined forward slightly, placing his forearms on his knees. The tattoo on his right arm became clearer, some form of dense, Eels. Deliberate script she still could not decipher. The actual choice, he said, is this. Tomorrow morning I will issue a statement. It will declare that you are under my protection. It will not mention an engagement unless that is your wish, Eels. It will not mention any personal involvement unless that is your wish. It will only communicate to all interested parties that any move against you will be interpreted as a move against me, Eels. That action alone secures you a month, possibly 2. Within that time frame, your father is unable to finalize his arrangement with Reyes, because Reyes will not make a move against me for a woman. He is fond of his knees. A charming turn of phrase, Eels. I can be less charming if you prefer. No, continue. During that month, you possess options. Should you wish to vanish, I will facilitate it. A genuine disappearance. New identity, new city, funds in an account under that name, Eels. Employment if you desire it, an apartment. You would not have contact from me again unless you initiated it. That is option 1. And the other? The other is you remain. You learn. You uncover what your father's actions truly were concerning your mother. Eels. You ascertain what Reyes truly is. Eels. You ascertain what I truly am. And at the conclusion of that process, if you determine that some form of alliance with me is desirable, we will construct it, on terms we jointly author. If you decide against it, you can exercise the disappearance option, Eels, taking with you whatever knowledge you have gained. My door will close behind you, and I will not pursue. She was quiet for a long interval. Those are not equivalent choices, she observed at last. No, you are biased toward the second one, Eels. You want me to accept it? Because, he said, I have a particular aversion to being alone. This was not the answer she anticipated. It lacked grandeur. It lacked strategy. It hung in the space between them, a small, unadorned truth, Eels, and she had no protocol for handling that either, Eels. She lifted her glass, took another sip. The initial burn had softened to a warmth more akin to a hand on her neck than a fire in her throat. "What is the protocol for tomorrow?" she asked. "You will sleep in. Katja will serve breakfast at your leisure." Eels. "At approximately 1000 hours, I will request 20 minutes of your time as a statement is released. Your presence on camera is not required. You will not be photographed." Eels. "Your only task is to review it and inform me of any inaccuracies or discomfort, and I will amend it. Following that, the day is yours. The house is at your disposal. The garden. There is a pool, if that appeals to you. The library is, of course, yours." Eels. "I will be present intermittently. I have meetings that cannot be rescheduled." Eels. "I prefer not to reschedule them, as it is imperative that the attendees observe that tonight's events did not destabilize me." "Did they? Did what destabilize you?" He looked at her, and for a moment, Eels. Something ancient and highly controlled in his expression shifted. "Yes," he said. "For what reason?" "Because my planning had accounted for only two possible outcomes tonight. I had not accounted for you walking into my library and requesting that I continue, Eels, when you could have simply consumed the broth and retired for the night." She offered no response to that. She did not know how. The fire was still unlit. She set down her glass, the sound of it against the wood almost imperceptible in the quiet room. Eels. "I am not agreeing to you," she stated. "I am aware. To the month. I am aware of that too. I require a meeting with my father." He became perfectly still. "When?" "Soon." Eels. "Not tomorrow. Soon. I have inquiries for him that will not be satisfied secondhand. I do not want you to send an intermediary. I do not want you to manage it for me. I want to be seated opposite him at a table, in a room of my choosing, Eels, with you in the building but not present in the room, and I want to ask him myself." "Arya." "Those are my terms, Lucien. For the month, I will have that." He observed her for a long moment. "Agreed," he said. "Okay, you will have that, Eels. I will assist in selecting the room." She gave a single nod. She did not trust her voice to say more. She rose to her feet, her legs trembling faintly again, but she remained standing. "I am retiring to bed," she said. "Good night, Arya." Eels. She stopped in the doorway, her hand resting on the frame. She did not turn back. "Lucien." "Yes, the woman, Katja. She indicated that you informed her there was a possibility I might arrive." "Not a certainty, a possibility. That is correct, Eels." "What did you estimate the probability to be?" He paused for a second. "Approximately 1 in 4, he said. "That low. You had no knowledge of me. You had no logical reason to appear. Then why prepare the entire wing?" "Because a 1 in 4 probability, Eels," he said, "is still a contingency worth preparing for." She lingered in the doorway a moment longer. Then she exited. Upstairs she did not bathe. She did not consume more of the broth, Eels. She did not activate the television she had noted in the corner of the sitting room. Eels. She removed the navy dress, folded it, and placed it on a chair where it resembled a flag for a nation she no longer served. She donned a robe Katja had laid out. It was cream-colored, soft, and too large for her in the shoulders. Eels. She got into the bed that was too large for a single occupant, and she did not sleep for a considerable time. She lay on her side observing the window, where the branch was now still, and she listened to the house settle, Eels, an unfamiliar structure belonging to an unfamiliar man, where she had, for the first time in her life, been presented with a door and a key that was hers to turn. She cried again, a brief, quiet, almost negligible release. Then she slept. Eels. She awoke to diffused light and the aroma of coffee. Katja had discreetly left a tray in the sitting room. Fresh fruit, a small pot, 2 pieces of toast, a folded newspaper, and on the paper, a single yellow adhesive note with black ink. Front page, Eels. "Take your time." Arya picked up the newspaper. She was, in fact, on the front page. Not the central story, not the largest photograph. It was a grainy image, captured from a distance, of 2 figures in a kiss in the center of the Hartley ballroom. Eels. Her own face was indistinct. She could see Lucien's hand on her jaw, the back of her head, and the ring of onlookers surrounding them. The headline read, "Drov claims Vance Hyras in shock public gesture." Eels. She read the word Hyras 3 times. No one had ever applied that word to her before. She read the article. It contained very little factual information, a great deal of speculation. Eels. A quote from an anonymous guest who described it as the most calculated romantic gambit the city had seen in a decade. A quote from a source allegedly close to Gregory Vance, declining to comment. No quote from Lucien. No quote from Arya. Eels. A brief paragraph at the end noted that a formal statement was anticipated later that morning. She set the paper aside. She consumed half a piece of toast. Then she went into the bathroom And for the first time, Heels observed herself in the daylight of that mirror. She was pale. Heels. The subject's eyes presented with significant inflammation. Her hair was disheveled, indicative of distress rather than hygiene. Her appearance was not that of an heiress, but of a 23-year-old female processing a high-stakes decision event. Heels. She was at that moment engaged in post-cognitive rationalization. She performed routine ablutions. She then clothed herself in garments provided for her, Heels, which were conveniently in her size. A detail the subject consciously chose to file away for later analysis. She located the captor, Lucian, in the library. He was seated, occupied with a phone, Heels. His upward glance upon her entry registered a micro-expression, not of relief, but of the structural components of relief, which was instantly suppressed. His greeting was neutral. Morning, Heels. Did you achieve REM sleep? He inquired. Good. The press identifies me as an heiress. It does. I'm not. On paper you are. Your father established and has been administering a trust in your mother's name, Heels. My legal team confirmed the asset's existence last night. Its value is less than media speculation, and he has been making withdrawals of a nature that are likely legal but morally corrosive. But technically, yes. I was unaware of this. I know, Heels. The subject approached the desk, remaining standing to maintain a posture of agency. Show me the statement, she commanded. He complied, sliding a single document toward her. It was a concise Heels. 3-paragraph declaration stating that as of the previous evening, Arya Vance was now under the personal protection of Lucian Drav and his organization, Heels. It further stipulated that any unsolicited action, communication, or attempt at contact would be treated as an act of aggression against him. The nature of their relationship, it concluded, would be disclosed, if ever, Heels, at a time and in a manner of their choosing. There was no reference to marriage, affection, or her father. This is clinical, she observed. It is that intentional? Yes. I do not want Reyes to detect any emotional vulnerability. Heels. Vulnerability is an opening. She reviewed the text again. 1 line, she stated. I require 1 addition. Add it. She utilized the pen from his desk. At the conclusion of the document, in small, precise script, she wrote, Heels. Miss Vance requests that her father, Gregory Vance, and his immediate household refrain from public statements on her behalf until she has personally spoken with him. Heels. She returned the document to his side of the desk. Lucian read it once, then a second time. He looked up at her, and for the first time in their interactions, an expression approximating a genuine smile manifested on his face. Heels. This will cause him considerable narcissistic injury, he stated. Good. He gave a slow, affirming nod. He picked up the phone and initiated a call. He dictated the statement, including her addendum, to an unseen party, Heels, instructing them to release it in 7 minutes. He terminated the call. 7 minutes? What occurs in 7 minutes? The social invisibility you've experienced is terminated. You will now become hyper-visible. The subject took a deep, Heels, regulating breath. Okay, she said, pulling out the chair opposite him. She sat. She folded her hands. Then let us begin the new baseline. Heels. He observed her for a protracted moment. Yes, Lucian said. Let's. Almost immediately the phone on his desk began to ring. He ignored it. She mirrored his behavior. The phone's ringing persisted for 4 days. Not that specific device. Heels. Lucian allowed it to exhaust its cycle on the first afternoon before having it removed. In the subsequent silence, Arya noted a conditioned flinch response in herself to the auditory stimulus. The burden of contact simply shifted to other devices. Heels. Kucha's phone, 2 rooms away. A polite, incessant ringing. Volkov's a harsher tone. The black phone in the library, which Lucian answered variably, creating an unpredictable reinforcement schedule. The world, it appeared, Heels, was now loud about Arya Vance. This outcome contradicted her expectations. She had anticipated continued social disregard, merely with a new pretext for the disregard. Heels. Instead, her image was on 3 publications by Tuesday. An old student identification photograph was procured from an unknown source. Heels. A media outlet ran a segment that Katya clinically reported had employed the term Cinderella twice and concubine once. Concubine, Arya repeated. Katya, engaging in a displacement activity of folding linens, replied, they are not sophisticated. Heels. I'm not his concubine. No, what am I? Katya ceased her activity. You are, she said. Arya Vance. That is your designation. Everything else is a label someone is attempting to impose on you. You are not required to accept any of them. Heels. Arya processed this data for the remainder of the day. Lucian had been truthful about the meetings. Heels. On the morning of the second day, she descended to find the environment already in motion. An SUV at the gate, two unfamiliar males in the hall, Volkov issuing instructions and Russian via a headset. Lucian himself, in a dark suit, was reviewing a file while a woman in a pantsuit gestured to a line. He noticed her on the stairs. "I will not return until late," he said. "Is that acceptable? Is that a question requiring an authentic response or a social nicety?" He almost laughed. It was the physiological precursor to a laugh. "I require an authentic response," he said. "Then yes, it is fine. Go. Katya has my secondary contact number." "If you require anything, go through her," he said. He departed. This became the pattern for the first week. His presence in the house was fragmented, shared morning coffee, an hour in the library before bed, in separate chairs without verbal exchange. It was a silence that had initially been a stressor, but had since morphed into a non-evaluative quiet, the first in her experience. There was no physical contact. He made no attempts. Once her wrist brushed his hand as she reached for the salt, and he reflexively shifted his hand to create space for her. The motion was so ingrained, so automatic, that she analyzed it for 2 days. Her old phone was a repository of ignored stimuli. She finally accessed it on the third day, after Katya offered a piece of unsolicited advice. "You can process them, or you can destroy them, but avoiding them is its own form of engagement." Arya sat on the bed and scrolled Gregory. "Gregory, 41 messages." She read the first. "Arya, please call me. This has escalated." She read the last. "Arya, I don't know what he has told you. Some of it will be true. Most will not. You don't know this man. I am begging you to come home before you commit to an irreversible action." He had employed the word begging. Gregory Vance. She reread that message 3 times, unable to recall a prior instance of him using a verb that positioned him in a subordinate role to her. He concluded with, "I love you, honey." She focused on honey for a long time. It felt like a term retrieved from storage, a calculated attempt at inducing an emotional regression. She did not reply. Vivian's messages displayed a different strategy: direct aggression. "You have humiliated this family. You have humiliated your father. You have no idea of the consequences. Celeste is distraught. Your father has not eaten in 2 days. You selfish child. Come home." And on the second day, a sentence that produced a physiological cold response in Arya's hand. "If you do not come home this week, you will find that the door is closed in a way your mother would have understood." Arya read that twice. She put the phone down. She picked it up. She captured a screenshot. With the screenshot displayed, she walked down the hall and into the library. Lucian was at his desk. A thin man in glasses, a lawyer she presumed, sat opposite him. Both men looked up. "I need a minute," she said. Lucian glanced at the lawyer. The lawyer stood, nodded to Arya, and exited without explicit instruction. Arya placed the phone on Lucian's desk, screen visible. He read the text. A muscle in his jaw contracted. It was the only observable physical reaction. "When was this received?" He asked. "Yesterday. Do you understand the reference?" "No, but I know it's a genuine threat. She doesn't use them when bluffing, only when she holds a tactical advantage." He looked up at her. "You want to proceed with the meeting?" he said. "Yes." "Now?" "Yes, my father, but not on his territory or yours. A neutral site. You select the building, I select the room." He nodded. "Give me 24 hours. "Fine." She turned to leave, but paused at the door without turning back. "Lucienne, yes. The information regarding my mother, the information you said you would provide soon." Silence. "Is it going to be a factor in this meeting?" she asked. "It can be." "Is it information that will cause me to hate him?" "That is not for me to determine. Is it information that should cause me to hate him?" He took a long, measured breath. "Yes," he said. She nodded once, without turning, and walked out. The meeting was scheduled for Friday in a building she'd never entered. An old stone law office, one of those discreet structures in the financial district that smelled of leather, mint, and a class of wealth that had no need for ostentation. The designated conference room was located on the 7th floor. The setting was intentionally sterile. A long table, cream-colored walls, and a single forgettable landscape painting. A water carafe and 4 glasses were present. Any signifiers of comfort, food, flowers, softness, were conspicuously absent. The subject Arya had selected the room for this exact clinical effect. She arrived early, a deliberate act of control. Her associate, Lucienne, escorted her to the door, where a final contingency plan was confirmed. "Does the subject require backup?" "Negative." Lucienne was to remain 2 doors away. A protocol was established. 2 knocks on the wall would signal Volkov to retrieve Lucien. Acknowledged. Deals. 3 knocks would signal a full withdrawal from the building. 3 knocks, exit. The subject confirmed her understanding. There was no physical contact, a noted and appreciated display of professional discipline from her associate. Deals. I'm going to be fine, she self-remarked. I know. The affirmation was repeated. I'm going to be fine, Lucien. The response unchanged. I said, I know. He departed. The subject then took her position not at the side of the table, Deals, but at its head, a calculated move for psychological dominance. This gave her a direct line of sight to the door on her left, the window on her right, and the empty chair for her father at the opposite end. She poured and drank half a glass of water, Deals, then folded her hands and assumed a state of observation, Deals. Gregory Vance entered 11 minutes later, alone, a deviation from the subject's expectations. Her initial observation was his diminished physical presence. This perception was immediately subjected to analysis to rule out cognitive bias, Deals. It is common for an individual, perceived from a subordinate position throughout life, to appear smaller when viewed at eye level. This accounted for part of the effect, but not all. The subject's father had lost significant weight, Deals. His shirt collar was visibly loose. His hair, once perceived as iron gray, was now uniformly gray with thinning at the scalp. A small, dark abrasion under his jaw, poorly concealed, indicated a recent shaving injury. Deals. Area. Sit down, Dad. He paused at the entryway before proceeding to the far chair. Thank you, he said. For agreeing to this, the subject dismissed the gesture. Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you. He acknowledged this with a nod. Deals. Placing his hands flat on the table. This was a familiar, dominant gesture from his history, a table flattener who used physical pressure to command a room. In this context, the gesture appeared defensive, as if he were bracing the table against movement. Deals. I don't know where to start, he confessed. The subject immediately took control of the narrative. Start with Anton Reyes. His head jerked up, a physiological sign of surprise. Start with Anton Reyes. He closed his eyes. Deals. A brief disassociation before a visible cognitive shift occurred. He had resolved to be truthful. Deals. The subject observed the change in his demeanor, a familiar signal. I was going to introduce you to him, he began. The subject immediately corrected the timeline. You did introduce me to him 3 months ago in the living room. Deals. He touched my wrist when he left. Gregory exhibited a full-body wince, a small but genuine somatic reaction. I told him to, he said, his volume lowered. The subject pressed for specifics. You told him not to what, exactly? Not to be too obvious? Deals. Not to scare me off before you'd wrapped the bow? That's not fair, Arya. It might not be fair. Is it accurate? His silence was an admission. The subject poured him a glass of water, employing a tactic learned from her mother. Deals. Providing comfort to a confessing male facilitates continued disclosure, even when hostility is the primary emotion. Deals. She slid the glass toward him. Why? She asked. You know why. Say it, Dad. Say it in this room to me. The company, he stated, is in trouble. How much trouble? The kind you don't come back from without help. Deals. How much money? He named a figure, a sum larger than she had anticipated. The subject's facial expression remained neutral, a product of extensive practice in emotional suppression. The practice was now serving its function, and Reyes was the help. Deals. Reyes's people. Yes. And what was I? A moment of hesitation. What was I in the deal, Dad? He briefly covered his face. When he lowered his hands, his eyes showed signs of tearing. Deals. The subject noted this physiological response for later emotional processing. You were a piece of it. Deals. A piece, he repeated. The social piece. The families would... The subject articulated the unstated truth. I was the marriage. Yes. You were going to promise me to a man I had met once for 20 minutes so he would forgive what you owe his organization. Deals. I was going to ask you. When? After the engagement party. I was going to tell you, he corrected, that we had an opportunity and that Anton was interested in you, and that if you were willing, it would help the family very much. Deals. And that if you were not willing, we would have found another way. Yes, Dad, yes. You are a bad liar now. You used to be a very good one. What changed? He stared at her. You did, he said. The subject remained silent. Deals. She demonstrated no discomfort with the silence, a behavioral trait learned from him. The night at the Hartley, he elaborated, when he kissed you in front of all those people, when you walked out of that room holding his hand. Deals. I came home and I sat in my study and I realized I could not remember the last time I had actually looked at you. His confession escalated in its self-flagellation. I don't mean looked at you. I mean looked. I don't know what color your eyes are, Arya. Feels. I had to ask Vivienne. I had to ask my wife what color my daughter's eyes are, and she didn't know either. And I sat in that chair, and I was ashamed in a way I have not been ashamed in 20 years. The subject allowed him to complete his narrative. Gray, Feels, she said. What, my eyes? They're gray, like Mom's. Feels. He closed his eyes again. I know, he said after a pause. I do know. I did know. I wanted to see if you would tell me. The subject rejected the manipulative tactic. Don't play games with me, Dad. Not today. I don't have the patience. I'm not playing. I'm Feels. He rubbed his face. I am trying very badly to speak to you like an adult, and not like a thing I damaged. The subject held this admission in silent consideration. Then tell me about Mom, she said, shifting the interrogation. He became physically still. Feels. Don't do that. Don't make me pull it out of you. Tell me what you did to her. A fractional movement of his hand on the table was noted. Who told you? He asked. Not who. What, Dad? His silence was prolonged. Feels. This was not a stall tactic. It appeared to be a genuine cognitive process, as if he were navigating a long disused section of his memory to locate a specific file. Your mother, he began finally, was not supposed to keep you. Feels. The subject registered a sharp physiological response to this statement. Meaning what? Meaning, he said, his voice thinning, that when she told me she was pregnant, I was married to Vivienne. I had been married to Vivienne for 5 years. Celeste was 7. Feels. I had a life. Your mother was something I was not supposed to have, and I had her anyway. And then she came to me and she said, I'm pregnant. And what did you do, Dad? I asked her not to keep you. Feels. The subject's hand tightened around the water glass. Feels. She did not lift it, and she said no. She said no. And then what? And then I had people, he said, his voice fracturing for the first time, offer her money to leave, to go somewhere else, to raise you without me in the picture. It was a lot of money. Feels. Arya. It was a lot of money and a house in another state and an income for your entire childhood. And she said no. And then I had people offer her more and she said no again. And then he paused. Then you what? I had a lawyer draft papers. Feels. What kind of papers? That if she kept you, she waived any claim to me, financial, legal, anything. And she signed them. She signed them, Arya repeated, initiating a controlled breathing exercise. Inhale for 4 counts. Exhale for 4. Feels. So when she was dying, she said, her voice perfectly modulated, and we couldn't afford her treatment. Feels. And I came to you and I asked you and you told me you'd already done what you could. I had already given her more than the papers required. You had already given her what you decided was fair. Arya. Feels. You let my mother die of a treatable cancer because a piece of paper you made her sign when she was 24 years old said you didn't have to pay for her. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Dad? It was complicated. Say the number. Feels. What number? The number it would have cost you to keep her alive another 2 years. You know it. You're the kind of man who knows exactly what number it would have been. Say it. He stated the number. When juxtaposed with his previously stated business debt, Feels, it was a clinically insignificant figure. Feels. A sum he could have paid without conscious notice. The subject placed the glass back on the table. Her hand, she observed, was perfectly steady. This observation was filed. Thank you, she said. Arya, thank you for telling me, Dad. I mean it. Feels. I didn't think you would. I loved your mother. Okay, I loved her. I heard you the first time. Arya, please, Dad. Yes, there's one more thing. Feels. He looked at her with the hollowed-out expression of a man who has reached the terminal stage of a long psychological collapse. What? Vivienne sent me a message 2 days ago. She said if I didn't come home, Feels, I would find the door closed in a way my mother would have understood. Feels. What did she mean? His entire facial affect shifted. This was the moment of confirmation for the subject. There was a component to the narrative that Gregory had not disclosed, a variable that was not solely his to control. Feels. She had observed him navigate every dark corridor of his own psyche for the past 20 minutes. But this, the mention of his wife's specific threat, was a corridor he had not anticipated entering. She started. Arya, I don't. Lie to me right now. Feels. You said you were trying to speak to me like an adult. Do it. He placed his hands on the table again. They were visibly trembling. Vivienne, he said, told your mother something before your mother died. I don't know what it was exactly. Feels. Your mother came to me afterwards, and she was very upset. She asked me if it was true. Feels. I stated no, I was not. The query was unclear. I presumed it pertained to finances, that Vivian had disclosed the existence of the papers. My response was negative. The subject's mother then exhibited the same facial expression as the subject does now, Feels, stating, "Greg, tell me you didn't know about the other baby." Arya's respiration ceased. "The other baby?" she echoed. The subject, Gregory, reports stating, "I didn't know what she meant." He continues his testimony. "I swear to you, Arya." Feels. "On whatever you want me to swear on." I did not understand her implication. When I questioned her, she refused to elaborate. She departed. Her death occurred 3 weeks later. I interrogated Vivian, who claimed your mother was delirious from medication. Feels, a conclusion I chose to accept. Feels. I permitted myself to believe it, and I have spent 4 years avoiding that question because I'm fundamentally a coward. Arya observed him. "There was another baby," she stated. "I don't know," he replied. "Before me? After me? Whose?" "I don't know, Arya." Feels. I have disclosed the full extent of my knowledge. She studied him for a protracted moment. It did not appear to be a fabrication, a fact that was somehow more disturbing. She rose. Gregory also rose, too quickly, the chair emitting a scraping sound. "Ari," Feels. "Sit down," she commanded. "Dad, please, sit," he complied. "I am going to require one action from you," she said. "You will go home. You will inform Vivian that I am aware of the papers, and you will inform her I know she communicated something to my mother." Feels. "You will not ask her for specifics. You will allow her to contemplate this for 1 week. That is all. And then I will question her myself. Arya, she will not cooperate. Not if she refused to tell me. She will. How can you be certain? Because." Feels. Arya stated, "I will not be the same girl to whom she sent that message. The next time she sees me, she will comprehend that distinction." Gregory stared. "You're not returning home," he observed. "No, you're staying with him. I am staying with myself, Dad." Feels. "He merely owns the structure I'm currently occupying." "Arya, this man, you don't know what he is. I know what you are." He flinched. "That isn't fair. You keep using that word." She proceeded to the door, paused, but did not turn. Feels. "Mom's medical records," she said. "You still have them?" "Yes." "Send them to this address, to the firm downstairs by day's end. All of them. Every scan, every clinical note, every hospital invoice you settled, and every one you did not." Feels. "I intend to review them myself." "Why?" "Because I want to ascertain the objective cost of saving her, Dad. Not the rationalized narrative you've constructed, but the version documented by the physicians. I want the actual figure." He remained silent. Feels. "By the end of the day," she repeated, then opened the door and walked out. She refrained from slamming it, as such a display would provide him with a narrative of her emotional instability. She did not want him to have that story. Feels. She closed it softly. She moved down the corridor on legs that, to her own surprise, were stable. Upon turning the corner, Lucien was present, back against the wall, hands in his pockets. Feels. Observing the same muted landscape painting that was a twin to the one she had just sat beneath. He straightened at her approach. He posed no questions. "Is there a location in this building?" she asked, with deliberate articulation. Feels. "Where I can destroy something of no consequence." "Take me there." He led her down one floor into a small vacant office containing boxes, glass-fronted bookshelves, a standing lamp, and dust in the corners. It was clearly disused. Feels. He secured the door behind them, scanned the room, and retrieved a heavy ceramic mug from a shelf, an artifact she presumed was left by a former employee. "This one," he stated, offering it to her. She hurled it against the far wall. The impact was violent. Feels. The shattering loud. Shards dispersed widely. The noise level was extreme within the confined space. She stood in the center, hands empty, chest rising and falling rapidly. To her astonishment, there were no tears. She was in a state of pure fury. Feels. It was a clean rage, possessing both shape and direction, and notably it was not directed inward, a novel mode of anger for her. She allowed it to fill her thoracic cavity, settling there, warm, bright, and perfectly manageable. Feels. Lucien observed her. "Another one?" He offered. "No." "Okay." She sat on the floor, leaning against the wall amidst the dust, still wearing the navy trousers she had selected so carefully that morning. After a moment, Lucien sat beside her. "Not too close." Feels. "Close enough." "He told me," she said, "about your mother." "Yes, and the papers, and the fact that V spoke to my mother before she died, and that there might have been another baby, and he claims ignorance as to its parentage." Feels. "And I don't believe he was lying." Lucien was silent for a considerable time. "That is the component I was not yet aware of," he said. "Which component?" "The other baby." Feels. You were unaware? No. Lucien, do not prevaricate with me on this. I am not lying to you, Arya. I knew your mother attempted to convey something to your father in her final weeks. I did not know the substance of it. I had hypotheses, feels. None of them involved an infant. She believed him. The impulse was the next step, she asked. Now, he said, you determine the scale of this conflict. Meaning, Vivian is not a minor adversary. Meaning, feels, if another child exists, there are reasons for the concealment, and those reasons will be dangerous. Meaning, if we engage her with the same tactics you just used on him, she will not capitulate. Your father is motivated by love for you. She is not, feels. I am aware she does not love me, Lucien. I know, feels. Then state your actual meaning. He turned his head to look at her. I mean that tonight you cease to be the girl who was rescued at a party. I mean the next time you enter a room with any of these individuals, feels. You do not enter as someone he is protecting, but as someone constructing her own power base. I mean that for the remainder of this engagement, you will not have a single interaction where your only leverage is me. We begin establishing your own leverage, feels. How? You will attend the meetings, not all of them, the ones I select. You will listen. You will observe the participants. You will learn to differentiate a genuine transaction from a theatrical performance. Feels. We will secure your own legal counsel. We will get you access to your mother's trust. We will ascertain what your father has been withdrawing from it, and we will make that information public in the correct forum at the optimal time. Feels. And we will identify who Vivian dispatched to your mother's hospital room the week before she died, because an individual was present. And that individual is the vector through which the other baby appears. You suspect Vivian, feels. I suspect Vivian Ashford has spent 9 years feigning that her family sold that pharmaceutical company for legitimate reasons. I suspect she has spent 4 years pretending she did not threaten a terminally ill woman, feels. And I suspect she sent you a message this week stating, the door is closed, in a manner your mother would have recognized, feels. And I believe she is not yet aware that she is not addressing the girl she presumes she is. Arya laughed. It was an involuntary unpleasant sound, short and jagged, and it felt cathartic. Okay, she said. Okay, Lucien, let's build me. He nodded. Feels. First lesson, he said. Yes, your father will call you tonight. He will cry. He will make statements he means and statements he does not. You will not answer the call. Why? Feels. Because the most significant error in a conflict with individuals like these is to allow them an apology before they have made a tangible concession. An apology before a concession is merely a coupon. Feels. You do not accept coupons, you accept concessions. Okay, second lesson. Yes. Tomorrow you and I will have our photograph taken deliberately. A controlled environment, a small event we can exit at will. You will not smile. You will not pose. Feels. You will stand beside me and look directly into the camera like a woman who has already determined the outcome. Why? Because the photograph from the Hartley event makes you appear kissed. I want the next one to make you appear dangerous. Feels. She looked at him. Lucien. Yes. Are you going to permit me to fall in love with you? The question was unplanned, emerging like the laugh. He was quiet for a long time. I am not going to prevent you, he said eventually. Feels, if that is what you choose to do. Feels. But I am not going to request it either. You have already been solicited for too many things you were not allowed to evaluate. You will not receive that from me. That is not an answer. You persist in saying that, feels, because you persist in not providing one. I am answering the question you posed. Perhaps you should pose a different one. Fine. Are you going to fall in love with me? He laughed. The first genuine laugh she had heard from him. It was brief and surprised. Feels. Sounding, she assessed, like a laugh that had been long dormant and had developed some rust. Probably, he said. Probably? Probably, Lucien. Yes, that's a more substantial answer than I anticipated. I know. Feels. She leaned her head back against the wall. Feels. She allowed her eyes to close for a second. The dust smelled of paper, old solvents, and a faint residue from the ceramic mug's last washing. In defiance of all logic, it was the first moment in 4 days she had felt a sense of stillness within her own body. Feels. Okay, she said. Tomorrow, the photograph. The day after, my lawyer. End of the week, Vivian. End of the week is precipitation. He observed her for a long moment. All right, he conceded. End of the week. She opened her eyes, Feels, her gaze falling on the ceramic fragments. Who is going to clean that up, she asked. I will, you? It is my building. Of course it is. Feels. The subject rose. She performed the perfunctory gesture of brushing dust from her trousers. An offer of her hand was made to the male subject, Lucien, who accepted it. She then leveraged her body weight to bring him to a standing position, heels, an act which required a surprising degree of exertion. A fleeting analysis registered in her expression. The man's physique suggested he did not require assistance, and his acceptance of it was a deliberate choice. Heels. He had allowed the power dynamic to shift, a calculated maneuver to grant her a sense of agency on this particular day. She did not offer a verbal acknowledgement of this transaction. It was not necessary. They exited the small, heels, barren office as a single unit and descended in the elevator. Outside, the black vehicle was positioned as expected. Volkov stood holding the door as the urban sky softened into the silver hue characteristic of late afternoon. Heels, Arya Vance entered the car on her own side. Heels. She did not wait for the courtesy of an open door. 7 floors above, her father figure remained seated at the table. Her gaze did not lift to the window. Home, Lucien instructed Volkov. The car began to move. Lucien, heels. She initiated without making eye contact. Yes, a final directive. Yes, I require the other infant to be located within the week. Whatever that individual's identity, whatever their current state of being, I must have the data. He paused before responding. Heels. Arya, he said, if this individual exists and is alive, they are a person who is in all probability not seeking us. That is an individual who may have an established life. You intend to intrude upon it. I intend to know. I am advising you to be certain. Heels. She turned her head, fixing him with her gaze. My maternal figure, she stated with clinical quiet, expired while posing a question to my father about this very subject. I will not proceed to my own death without its resolution. Locate them, heels. He maintained eye contact for a sustained second. Okay, he conceded. His focus shifted to the window. Outside, the cityscape passed. A long gray expanse of structures that had not yet been conditioned to recognize her name. And above them, heels. Located in a nursery or a classroom or an office or a grave, was an individual whose life pattern was about to be forcibly reconfigured, much like her own had been. And Arya Vance, seated in the back of a black car during a silver afternoon, heels, permitted herself to process for the first time not merely the trauma inflicted upon her, but her own nascent capacity for inflicting it in return. Heels. The photograph was disseminated on Wednesday morning. The subject, Arya, had experienced disrupted sleep the previous night. She had remained in the library with Lucien until nearly 200 hours, heels, analyzing the legal abstract of her mother's trust. 41 pages with a density comparable to concrete were punctuated by parenthetical clauses that, upon second review, revealed themselves as the document's critical components. Heels. Her father had been making withdrawals against the trust for 9 years, not in a single event, but in small, regular quarterly increments. The type of draws designed to evade detection on any single statement, heels, but which accumulated over a decade to approximately 1/3 of the assets Eleanor Cassidy believed she was bequeathing to her daughter. He utilized the term custodian in these filings, Lucien noted, indicating a specific line. Heels. Custodian is not his legal designation. Custodian is the term one employs when feigning a custodial role. He was not. He was a trustee bound by a fiduciary obligation. For a significant number of years, heels, he has treated it as a discretionary spending account. For what purpose? Your upbringing. That will be his argument in a legal setting. He will cite private schooling. He will cite apparel. He will cite the tutor, heels. The one he employed for a single summer when you were 15. My stepmother employed the tutor. Your stepmother, Lucien corrected, will not corroborate that account. Arya stared at the document. Can I retrieve this from him? She asked. Yes. Covertly, heels. Not covertly. Cleanly, yes. Covertly, no. He will resist because the moment you act, his financial analysts will register that his accounts are being scrutinized by an entity that is no longer aligned with his interests. Good, heels. Lucien observed her for a long moment. Arya, he said. Yes. You have progressed from I don't want to make this ugly to good in approximately 72 hours. I engaged in a conversation with my father, Lucien. I am aware. I am permitted this. Heels. You are permitted. She produced a laugh. It was fatigued, harsh, authentic. They proceeded to work for another hour, after which she ascended to her suite and experienced fragmented sleep. When she awoke on Wednesday morning, heels, the photograph was already being composed on the front drive. It was a simple scenario. No formal event, no red carpet, just a single photographer, heels, an operative named Hollis, who had a prior working relationship with Lucien. and who refrained from asking questions to which he did not require answers. Standing on the gravel with a camera that appeared inexpensive, but was in fact, feels, one of the most valuable compact cameras in the city. Feels. Lucien had personally selected her attire. He had first made a careful inquiry and she had consented. She needed to know his perception of her, and the result was not what she had anticipated. It was dark green, long-sleeved, high-necked, and unadorned heels. No jewelry, hair unfixed, no significant makeup except for her mouth. Katja had applied a deep red pigment that Arya initially failed to recognize as her own in the mirror. After a moment, she integrated it into her self-concept. Heels. She stood next to Lucien on the steps. "Do not smile," he instructed quietly, adjusted the focus. "You already stated that." "I know. Should my focus be on you or on him?" "On him. On the lens. Not through it. At it." Heels. "As if you are assessing its value." She complied. Hollis captured 4 images. He showed Lucien the second. Lucien examined it. Heels. He angled the screen for her to view. In the photograph, she did not appear kissed. She did not appear fearful. She appeared as a woman standing before a house she had not yet determined to retain. "That one," Lucien stated. "That one." Arya concurred. Heels. It was released at 0900 hours with a single-line caption. Arya Vance photographed at home Wednesday morning. No further text, no explanation, no statement. By noon, it occupied the front page of 4 newspapers. By 1500 hours, Heels. Vivian Ashford had transmitted her 18th message of the week to Arya. "I need to see you." Arya processed the text in the garden, seated on a low stone bench, a cup of tea cooling in her hand. She read it 2 times. Heels. She placed the phone beside her on the stone. She picked up the tea, drank it despite its temperature, and did not reply. Not yet. During this period, she was beginning to understand the specific gravity of non-response. Heels. It was a weight she had never been permitted to wield. Throughout her life, she had responded to instructors, to Gregory, to Vivienne, to Celeste, to men at Gallus who made physical contact with her wrist when she was 12. To not reply was to be rude, Heels, and rudeness was a behavior she had been conditioned against early on. She was now learning the distinction between rudeness and power. She was learning that silence, when wielded correctly, is not the absence of an answer, Heels. It is an answer that extracts a higher psychological cost from the other person than a direct response ever could. In those days, she was also learning other things. Lucien had not been speaking metaphorically about the meetings. Heels. On Thursday, he escorted her to a downtown conference room, 7th floor, not the same structure as her father's meeting, but in close proximity. 8 individuals at a long table, males in their 50s, 1 female in her 40s, Heels, a younger male at the end transcribing notes. The agenda concerned a port. Arya possessed no knowledge of ports. She had questioned Lucien on the matter that morning, and he had stated, "You are not present to speak. You are present to observe, Heels. I will identify you at the outset, and then I want you to sit at my right and conduct a continuous facial analysis of everyone in the room for the entire 2 hours. Afterward, we will compare our findings. What am I analyzing for? Who is bluffing, Heels? Who is exhibiting genuine anger? Who is performing anger as a negotiation tactic? Who entered the room already knowing the outcome and is merely waiting for the rest of us to arrive at it? Lucien, I have never. You have been doing, Heels it, since you were a child. You were doing it at the Hartley. You were doing it in your mother's hospital room. You do it every time you enter a room containing Vivienne. I am simply requesting that you do it in a context where it has tangible consequences, Heels. She did it. She sat at his right. He introduced her with a single line at the start. Miss Vance is observing today. Proceed as you would. No one made direct eye contact with her after that, Heels, but she registered 2 of the men, the older one in the navy suit and a thinner one with a poor shave, glance at her 3 times within the first 20 minutes. The woman in her 40s did not look at her at all, which was, in itself, a form of observation. Heels. Arya monitored their hands, their water glasses, and the way they said yes when they meant something else. Heels. She observed the thin man with the bad shave accept a phone call he presented as an emergency. She watched him return and state that he had to depart. She observed his exit, and 20 minutes later, the deal shifted significantly in Lucien's favor. Heels. Later in the car, Lucien prompted report. She stated, the thin man was not called away. He required a pretext to exit before the final number was presented. He did not want to voice a no in a group setting. Heels. He wanted the room to consent without his participation. Why? Because he has a personal obligation to the older man in the navy suit. Not financial. Something involving a wife or daughter. The specifics were unclear. Feels. He could not vote against him to his face. Lucien was silent for a prolonged period. Feels. That is a precise summary of what occurred, he said. Is it? Yes. How did you ascertain this? Because Navy Suit informed me 2 months ago that he possessed leverage over the thin man and intended to use it in this meeting. I did not know the exact timing. Feels. I knew today was a possibility. Arya turned in her seat. You sent me into that room already possessing the solution. I sent you into that room, Lucien stated, to determine if you could arrive at a solution I already possessed. Which you did, Feels, in approximately 40 minutes regarding a deal you did not comprehend, in a room of subjects who resisted analysis. Was that a test? Yes. Did I pass? He glanced at her sideways. Feels, the near smile re-emerging. It had begun to manifest more frequently of late in small, quick flickers, as if it were a function his facial muscles were relearning. You passed, he said. Good. Feels. Are you? Affirmative. The subject's response signals an imminent cessation of these diagnostic tests. The reasoning provided is a transfer of operational control. Feels. You're going to start running the room, and I'm going to stop being the one who knows the answer before you do. The subject, Arya, offered no verbal response to this statement. This silence was permitted, and they returned to the residence. Feels. It is noted that this quietude over the preceding week had ceased to be a source of discomfort and had become a new baseline. Friday's objective, the antagonist, Vivian. The subject had deliberated on the venue for 3 days, Feels, altering the location twice. The father's house was rejected. A restaurant was rejected. The antagonist performs well in such environments. Lucian's residence was also ruled out, Feels, as it would offer a transparent tactical advantage while reducing the encounter to a theatrical display. Feels. The subject required this interaction to be contained, quiet, and clinically precise. A tea shop was selected. It occupied a corner the subject had passed 100 times but never entered, Feels, based on a prior statement from the antagonist that such places are for women without anywhere else to be. This meant Vivian, by her own metrics, would rarely frequent them. It meant Vivian would be entering territory she did not control, Feels. The subject arrived early. She secured the table in the far corner, back to the wall with a clear view of the entrance. This is the same strategic positioning observed in the law office engagement. She is, it appears, Feels, beginning to internalize the spatial tactics of her associate, Lucien. The caregiver figure, Katya, had offered to provide proximal support, not at the meeting itself, but at a nearby table. Feels. The subject considered the offer at length before declining. She has to see me alone, Arya stated. She will be unkind, Katya predicted. I know. She will try to find the place in you that still wants her approval. I know. Feels. Do you still have that place in you, Miss Vance? After a prolonged inhalation, the subject admitted its presence. Yes, she conceded. A little. Not as much as I did a month ago. Then she will find it. Let her. Following a long, evaluative look, Feels. Katya nodded. I will be at the house when you return. There will be soup. This concluded the exchange. The antagonist, Vivian, entered the tea shop at 2 minutes past the designated hour. Feels. Her presentation was impeccable, as is standard for her. A camel coat, a cream scarf, small pearls, the type that communicate wealth without being ostentatious. Feels. Her hair was styled in the soft waves the subject had observed, her setting in curlers for 1,000 nights of her childhood. She moved as she always did, like a woman whose schedule had allocated precisely 26 minutes for this event. Feels. She paused 2 feet inside the door to scan the room. She located the subject. Arya carefully observed the antagonist's facial reaction in that initial second. A flicker, minute, almost imperceptible. Feels. It was not the flicker of a stepmother registering a stepdaughter. It was the flicker of an operator identifying a problem. Feels. Vivian approached and sat, forgoing any greeting. You look tired, Vivian observed. I've been busy. Clearly, a waitress materialized. Vivian ordered Earl Grey with milk, no sugar. Feels. Using a tone that compelled immediate compliance without the need for notation. The subject had already ordered the most unremarkable tea available. She was not present for sensory experience. Why did you pick this place? Vivian asked. Feels. Because you hate tea shops. I don't hate tea shops. You told me once that they were for women without anywhere else to be. I don't remember saying that. You said it at the club. I was 16. You were wearing green. Feels. The muscles around Vivian's mouth tightened. The memory had been accessed. Feels. Arya observed the moment of recall. All right, Vivian said, folding her hands on the table. You picked the venue. You picked the time. You clearly have something to say. Say it. I want to know what you told my mother. Vivian's posture became rigid. Heels. The effect lasted less than a second, but it was sufficient. Your mother, Vivian said, was a very ill woman at the end. I'm not asking about the end. I'm asking about the conversation, the one before the end. You went to the hospital. You went alone. Heels. My father didn't know you were going. You went to her room and you said something to her, and 3 weeks later she died asking him a question about it. What did you say? I don't think this is a conversation we should have. Heels. We're having it, Arya. Vivian, you don't know what you're asking about. Then tell me. The antagonist looked at her, a genuine assessment. And for the first time, Heels, the subject witnessed something in Vivian's expression that was neither contempt nor performance. It was calculation, raw, rapid, adult calculation. Vivian was running a psychological equation on her at the table. Heels. Arya understood she was being reassessed in real time. She understood that the woman across from her was slowly realizing that the stepdaughter filed under manageable for 11 years had become an uncategorized variable. Your mother, Heels, Vivian said carefully, was not the only woman your father had. I know that. Do you? Yes. Heels. He married you while he was already sleeping with her. I've known that since I was 14. That's not what I mean. The subject's mouth became dry. Then what do you mean, Vivian? The antagonist observed her for a long moment. I mean, she said, Heels, that there was another woman before your mother. During my marriage, during Celeste's childhood, I dealt with her the way women in my position deal with these things. Quietly, financially, without fuss. Okay, that woman had a child. Okay, that child, Heels, Vivian said, was not carried to term. The subject remained motionless. You're telling me, I am telling you, Vivian said, that I paid for it to not be carried to term. The woman agreed. Heels. There was a medical procedure in a clinic in a state neither she nor your father had ever been to. Heels. She received a considerable amount of money. She signed documents. And my mother, Vivian said, was told about it. Yes, by you, by me. When? About a month before she died. Why? Vivian tilted her head. The gesture was small. Heels. Familiar to the subject. It was the precursor to a saved, impactful statement. Because your mother, Vivian said, had started to tell Gregory she wanted you acknowledged officially in the will as a Vance. Heels. She had been pushing him on it for about 6 months and he had been weakening. He was a sentimental man and your mother was dying, and sentimental men lose their spine when women are dying. Heels. I went to see her because I needed her to understand what I was willing to do to protect my daughter's share of this family. I told her the story about the other woman. I told her about the procedure. Heels. I told her I would do it again with different tools if she kept pushing. Thoughts? The subject's hand was on her cup with no memory of placing it there. You threatened her, she said. I warned her. Heels. You told a dying woman that you had paid for a woman to lose a pregnancy, and you told her to stop pushing for her daughter to be acknowledged, or you would. I told her I would not lose what I had built. That's what you think you told her. Heels. That's not what she heard. Heels. I don't control what she heard. She heard you threaten me. Vivian's mouth moved, but she produced no sound. You walked into my mother's hospital room, Arya said, noting with a clinical distance that her own voice had become very quiet. Heels. This quiet was not weakness. It was a physiological response, the body conserving energy once it decided volume was unnecessary. And you told her a story about a baby that you had paid to make go away, Heels, and you did it so she would understand what you were willing to do to her child, to me. I did not threaten you, Vivian. I did not threaten. Look at me. Vivian looked. I am her child, Arya said. I was her child sitting next to her hospital bed, Heels. When she stopped eating, when she could not remember her own sister's name, when she asked me in the middle of one night, is the baby all right? And I thought she meant me, Heels. And I said, yes, Mom, I'm here. And she said, not you, the other one. And I thought she was dying delirious. I thought it was the morphine. You let me think it was the morphine for 4 years. I did not let you. You sent her to her grave, Arya said. Heels, thinking I was next. Vivian offered no response. The tea arrived. The waitress placed the cup before Vivian, who did not acknowledge her. The waitress, sensing the ambient psychological state, departed quickly. Vivian lifted the cup. Her hand was steady. Heels. It had always been steady. This physiological control was the very thing the subject had spent a lifetime simultaneously despising and attempting to emulate. Heels. You are not a child anymore, Vivian stated. No. So I will tell you the truth the way adults tell each other the truth. Heels. I did what I did because I had a daughter to protect, and a husband who did not have the stomach to make these decisions himself, and a family that would have collapsed if I had waited for him to do what needed to be done. Your mother made her choice, Heels. She chose to keep you. I respected that more than you will ever know. I did not ask for the procedure with her. I asked for silence. She did not give it, Heels. So I went to see her, and I told her a story that she would understand, and I asked her to give it to me, and she did. She stopped pushing. Your father did not put you in the will, Heels. She died. That is what happened. You can hate me for it. You are entitled. But do not pretend you do not understand it, Arya. You are not stupid. You have had a week of being in that man's house, Heels, and you have already started to understand what protecting a thing looks like. You just wear a prettier coat when you do it. A pause. You the same? She said. I think we will be eventually. We are not. We are going to be. No, Arya. No, Vivian, Heels. The subject was experiencing an internal tremor. Deep within her physiology, she stood. I have one more thing to ask you, she said. Ask. The other woman before my mother, Heels. Does the name remain in your possession? Vivian evaluated her for a considerable time. Yes, she stated. You will provide it to me. What is my motivation for doing so? Because, Arya countered, Heels. I will acquire the information regardless of your cooperation. If I obtain it through you, it will be one matter. If I obtain it without you, I will construct the most damaging narrative regarding your actions toward her, Heels. That narrative will be disseminated publicly and become the accepted record. Provide the name. I offer no guarantee of kindness in its use. I do, however, promise accuracy. A flicker of what might have been a smile touched Vivian's mouth, Heels. It was not a smile. It was the echo of one, the expression of a subject observing a much younger specimen rapidly assimilating a new predatory skill set. Her name, Vivian said, was Ines Marin, Heels. Arya committed the name to memory. She did not record it in writing. She did not vocalize it. Is she alive? She asked. I have no knowledge. You have no knowledge. I have not monitored her life, Arya. I compensated her for her departure, Heels. She departed. The transaction was complete. Thank you, Vivian. For what? For finally offering a verifiable fact. Arya exited the establishment. No backward glance, no haste. Her gait was new, Heels, adopted over the preceding week. The walk of an individual for whom haste is unnecessary, because the external world has finally calibrated to her internal rhythm. Outside, the pavement was cold. The winter light was stark, Heels, rendering the architecture two-dimensional. A man collided with her shoulder, offered a reflexive apology. She registered no flinch at the unexpected contact from a stranger. She noted this development. It felt novel. Heels. The black vehicle was positioned at the corner. She entered. Volkov remained silent. It was unnecessary for him to speak. He understood, through some instinct, that silence was the required environmental condition. Heels. He drove her away from the financial district, tracing the river road, and then taking the extended northern route home. This was because Lucian had at some point issued a standing order, Heels. Do not take the direct route when she is in the car after a difficult encounter. She became aware of this somewhere along the river. The river was often a place of such realizations. She realized Lucian had been erecting an entire framework of minor, Heels, calculated comforts around her without her conscious notice. The extended route home, the secondary mobile phone, the key Katya provided on the first night, the absence of physical contact, the ceramic mug in the derelict office, Heels, the dark green dress on Wednesday morning, selected because it projected power without suggesting costume. Heels, the way he inquired each morning, Heels, if she had slept, and how he awaited a response before proceeding with any other topic. These were not acts of love. She understood that love is not a support structure. Love is the edifice one might construct upon that structure, should it prove stable, Heels. But the scaffolding itself, she understood, was the first thing anyone had ever intentionally built for her. Tears had begun to form by the time they approached the gate. Not a violent or disfiguring display, Heels. Simply a constant flow of water down her face that she made no effort to wipe away. Volkov observed her once in the mirror and inquired with great precision, "Shall I circle again, Miss Vance?" "No," she replied. "Thank you. Take me in." Heels. She entered the residence. Katya was present in the foyer, as Katya was always present in the foyer upon her return from a significant stressor. Katya did not ask questions. She extended her arms slightly, a minor offering. Heels. Not a demand, and after a long pause, Arya moved into the embrace. Katya held her for 1 minute, no longer. A minute was the maximum duration Arya could tolerate. "Soup is on the stove," Katya stated. "Is he here?" "In the library." "Does he know?" Heels. He has spent a lifetime listening at doors, Miss Vance. He has an approximation. He lacks the specifics. Okay. She proceeded to the library. He was positioned at the window, not the desk. Heels. His hands were in his pockets, observing the drive she had just traversed, because he had, she now saw, been awaiting the vehicle's arrival. He turned as she entered. He did not inquire. Insmaren, she said. Spell it. She complied. He retrieved his phone, Heels, dispatched a message, and put the device away. Tomorrow, he stated, Volkov and 2 others will have a location for her. Hurstus, alive or deceased, where, when, with whom. You will receive that intelligence before I do, Heels, and you will determine the subsequent course of action. Okay, Arya, yes. How are you? She observed him. Her mouth opened to produce the reflexive, conditioned response she had provided to others for years. I'm fine. Then she paused, Heels, because she was beginning to comprehend that he was not a man to whom one supplied that answer. Heels. Not due to any threat of punishment for the falsehood, but because he would accept it as truth, and she found she did not want to be believed when she said it. I'm not fine, she said. No, Heels. She told me she had financed the termination of another woman's pregnancy before my mother's. She told me she used that history to control my mother. She told me my mother interpreted it as a specific threat against me, Heels, which caused her to cease lobbying my father to include me in his will, and that is the reason for the circumstances of my upbringing. She told me I would, in time, understand, that I would become her, that she and I are identical. You are not, Heels. I know we're not. Are you certain? She looked at him sharply. Why would you ask me that? Because, he said, you are standing in a residence belonging to a man who, on paper, Heels, is not substantially different from the individuals who perpetrated this against you. Heels. You are acquiring the skill of reading rooms. You are acquiring the skill of choosing rooms. You are learning to enter a building and not exit until the target of your visit has been reduced to tears. I am not denying the adaptation is occurring, Heels. I am asking you, because no one else will, if you are so certain of the trajectory. She lowered herself to the floor. She sat on the floor of his library, wearing a camel coat, because her limbs had once again ceased to function as weight-bearing structures. Heels. She pressed the palms of her hands against her eyes with significant force and focused on her breathing. I don't know, she said. I don't know, Ocean. Okay, I don't know if I am becoming a person I want to be, Heels, or a person I was always destined to become, Heels. I don't know if a distinction exists. I left that room proud of my performance in handling her. Then I entered the car and considered that she would have been proud of my performance in handling her, Heels. And I realized the person whose approval I craved is a woman who just admitted to threatening my dying mother. I do not know how to reconcile these two cognitions. He did not approach and sit beside her. She registered this through the psychic haze, Heels, and she understood the rationale. His proximity would have constituted comfort, and comfort, at this juncture, would have foreclosed the question she was trying to resolve. He remained at his station. He allowed her to sit on the floor and confront it, Heels. I do not believe you are becoming her, he said after a time. I believe you are becoming a person who can replicate her actions when necessary, which is not the same pathology. Vivian behaves as she does from a fear of losing status, Heels, a fear she has harbored since she was young. You are not motivated by fear of losing status. You had no status to lose. Your primary motivator is a fear of not being seen, and you are constructing a life in which you cannot be unseen again, Heels. These are different psychological engines, Arya. They may power similar-looking vehicles, but the engines are different. She laughed. It was an involuntary reaction. That's a superior analysis, she said, than what I was expecting, Heels. I have been considering it, Heels. Since when? Since the meeting with your father. Since you responded good when I informed you the situation would become ugly. I have considered it every day since then. Was I inducing a change in you, Heels, or was I merely observing you enacting a change upon yourself? I concluded approximately 2 nights ago that it was the latter. How certain are you? Not entirely. Good, good. If you had claimed complete certainty, Heels, I would have identified it as a deception and been forced to vacate the premises. Noted. She remained on the floor for another minute. Then she rose. Without grace, she used the arm of a chair for leverage and stood, Heels, wiping her face with the back of her wrist. Heels. Then she walked to the window and stood beside him, maintaining no physical contact, looking out at the same drive she had arrived on. Lucian. Yes, I am going to marry you. He remained motionless. For a very long second he did not move at all. Then, feels. Very slowly, he turned his head to regard her from the side, and she perceived, beneath the typical placid surface of his face, something she had not previously witnessed. It was not surprise, nor relief. It was a kind of quiet, intense focus, feels, as if he had been navigating a cliff's edge for a great distance and had just felt the ground beneath his feet become solid. When, he asked. Not immediately, not this month, but it is my intention. I want you to be aware of this, feels, because I want you to cease formulating strategies based on the possibility of my departure, feels. You will make different decisions if you are certain I am not leaving. Arya. Yes. You do not have to state that to elicit different decisions from me. I know I was already making them. I know, Lucian. I am stating it because it is factual, feels, not because it is a strategic maneuver. He looked at her for a long, long time. Okay, he said, his voice very low. Okay. I am, he said, and his voice was now rougher than it had been a moment before, going to require a moment. Take it. He took it, feels. He stood there at the window, one hand braced lightly on the sill, the other in his pocket, and she did not observe him as he took it. She understood that he had experienced few moments of this nature in his life, feels, and that a man of his constitution does not wish to be observed inside one. She looked out at the drive, feels. The subject observed the terminal phase of daylight filtering through the trees. She noted the asset Volkov, traversing the property, a phone affixed to his ear. Her cognitions then shifted to the woman, Ines Marin, feels, an unknown variable now introduced into the equation, whose life trajectory was about to be altered by the two figures in this remote, controlled environment. Then the male subject, Lucian, initiated a disclosure. There's an informational deficit, feels, he stated, regarding me. A pause, a calculated delay. Before the end of the month, the disclosure will occur. It is a prerequisite for your stated course of action, not a consequence. Her query, what is it? His response, negative valence, feels. Her assessment, is it worse than my current hypothesis? His clarification was precise, not worse. Specific. She deferred the data transfer. Then tell me when you tell me. Feels. A shift in posture. Direct ocular engagement. The subject's scan of Lucian was clinical. The tattoo visible on his forearm where the fabric was displaced, the hard geometry of his mandible, the intrusion of gray at his temple previously untalogged. Feels. Her internal monologue presented a moment of dissociation, free of sentiment. You are an individual with a history of significant actions, and you are ceding the choice of knowing them to me, feels. This is the primary differentiator between you and the antagonist, Vivienne. This is the core of my non-identification with her. An instruction followed. Lucienne, yes, locate her with expediency. I require contact before Vivienne establishes her own, feels. His question was a probe. You anticipate Vivienne will make a move? Her analysis was sharp. Vivienne provided that name as a preemptive strike against me, providing it to an alternate party. I assess she will contact Ines tonight, feels. The window of opportunity is likely no more than 12 hours before the target becomes inaccessible. He observed her. His validation was concise. That is a highly accurate assessment. A commitment. I'll dispatch Vulov in the morning, feels. Her countermand was immediate. Dispatch him tonight. She invoked his name to override hesitation. Lucien, he complied, picking up the phone. Vulov was mobilized that night. The vehicle departed at 20:30 hours. Arya remained on the steps, feels, tracking the red taillights until they were absorbed by the gate. The secondary female, Katya, emerged and placed a shawl over her, a non-verbal act of support. From a second-floor window, Lucienne maintained surveillance on them both, feels. In an unknown urban center, the target, Ines Marin, was about to experience an unscheduled visit from a physically imposing man in a dark coat, an operative who would, by all metrics, be the most benign visitor she'd had in 11 years, and who would relay with care that a young woman she did not know, feels, had a severe need to establish communication, was willing to travel to her, and would not be accompanied by legal counsel. The subject, Arya, did not enter a sleep state that night, feels. She remained in the library with Lucian until nearly 0300, not engaged in work or specific discourse, but co-participating in the prolonged, decelerating conclusion of the day. At some point, feels, she became aware that her hand was resting on his forearm, directly over the tattoo, the script still indecipherable to her. She had no memory of initiating the contact, and noted he had not withdrawn, feels. The physical contact was not acknowledged verbally by either party. It required no such confirmation. Outside, the black arboreal forms of the drive were static, The house itself seemed to function as a living organism around them. Heels. In another sector of the structure, Katia was consuming a small measure of straight liquor, contemplating the woman who was about to consciously walk into the family's foundational secret. Heels. Meanwhile, on the 7th floor of a downtown building, a woman adorned with pearls was processing an unexpected digital message. Her hand, for the first time in a significant duration, displayed a notable tremor. Heels. Volkov's call came at 0400. Arya had finally succumbed to sleep on the library couch, one hand still in loose contact with Lucian's arm, her head at a biomechanically unsound angle against the armrest. Lucian had remained immobile, heels, at some point placing his jacket over her. When the phone vibrated, he secured it before the second signal and moved silently to the window to prevent the sound from disturbing her. Yes, Vulov communicated in Russian for approximately 40 seconds, heels, his tone low and clipped. Lucien offered a single response, then placed him on hold. Heels. A new voice emerged on the line, female, exhibiting signs of extreme fatigue and caution. Lucien engaged in a prolonged period of listening without speaking. He eventually responded, "Thank you, Miss Marin. Your position is understood." Heels. "We will await your signal." He terminated the call. Arya was now sitting upright. "She's viable," he reported. Location? 2 states away, minor population center. Employed as a nurse for 9 years, operating under her legal name. Heels. She has 2 offspring, ages 7 and 9, not from your father's lineage, with a man named Reyes. Arya's physiological response was complex. Reyes? Not the Reyes of our concern. A completely separate family. It's a high-frequency surname. Heels. I verified. Certainty. Vulov extracted the marriage and birth certificates while positioned on her kitchen floor. Different city of origin, entirely different timeline for the last 4 years. The data is confirmed, Arya. Heels. Understood. She requires a 24-hour period to decide on a meeting. Understood. She wants it known prior to her decision that she holds no animosity. She stated this twice. She instructed Vulov to ensure I relayed this to you. Heels. Arya closed her eyes. Okay, she repeated. It was the only word her lexicon seemed capable of producing. Lucian sat on the periphery of the couch, not in proximity. He allowed the furniture to bridge the distance. Heels. Arya carefully rested her head on his shoulder, an act of trust he permitted. They remained in this state for a significant duration non-verbally. Outside, the sky began its slow transition from black to the soft pre-dawn blue-gray. Heels. Inez Marin consented to a meeting on a Thursday. Arya traveled on Wednesday with Lucien and Vulov, and then proceeded without them. This was her stipulated condition. Lucien had offered 1 point of resistance, not on the grounds of safety, Heels, but of logistics. When she stated firmly, "No, Lucien, this phase is executed alone," he ceased his objections and instead implemented contingencies. The hotel was 3 blocks from the target's residence. Heels. Vulov would be stationed in a vehicle 2 streets over, out of the line of sight. Her phone was equipped with a panic function that would summon them both to the door in under 4 minutes. The meeting was held in the kitchen, Inez's choice. Kitchens, Heels, she had noted, were easier spaces for interacting with strangers. Ines was a small woman, smaller than Arya's projection, with dark hair showing silver at the temples. Her face, once beautiful, had weathered into something more difficult to classify. Heels. She was wearing medical scrubs, having just returned from a shift. Her hands showed the roughness of constant sanitizing. Children's art was displayed on the refrigerator, affixed with alphabet magnets. Heels. The environment held faint olfactory notes of garlic and laundry soap. She poured 2 coffees, placing the milk on the table for Arya to access herself. "I was not aware the funds were sent because of your mother," Ines stated after a period of silence. Heels. "I knew of the wife. I knew she was the source of the offer. I was not aware of another woman's involvement in the narrative, and I was not aware of a child. Not you, not then. When did you become aware of me?" "Approximately a year later." Heels. A newspaper photograph. A society page. Gregory Vance with a young girl at a charity function. The caption identified her as daughter. I looked at the child, performed the necessary temporal calculations, and the situation became clear. Heels. I remained on my kitchen floor for a considerable time. "I'm sorry. Do not. That is not your apology to offer." Arya placed her cup down. "Vivian informed me," she said, "that you consented to the procedure." "I did. She said you signed documents." Heels. "I signed documents. Did she employ threats?" Ines regarded her for a long moment. Her voice remained level. "She did nothing a lawyer could isolate. She came to my small apartment and sat in my only chair. She then explained very kindly, Eels, that if I declined the money and her request, she would initiate 3 actions. Eels. First, she would ensure my sponsoring hospital would not renew my work visa. Second, she would ensure my brother's pending immigration case would fail. And third, she would ensure that the child, if carried to term, Eels, would bear my last name, which she said with a small smile, as we both understood my surname would not provide the same advantages as another might. She delivered all of this while drinking the coffee I made for her. Eels. She left a check on the table upon her departure. It was a substantial check. Eanes, I intend to take action against her. I know, I saw your photograph in the paper last week. The green dress. I showed it to my husband. He asked who you were. Eels. I told him, I think she's the girl who is going to act against the woman who sat in my kitchen 11 years ago. Good. He isn't privy to the specifics. He doesn't need to be. Would you provide testimony? To what? To any of it. Eels. A deposition, a statement, a recording. The final form of the instrument is not yet determined. I'm asking about your willingness should it become necessary. Eanes inhaled deeply. I have 2 children, she said. I'm aware. They are not aware of the first. Eels. I cannot be on the front page of a newspaper, Arya. I am a nurse in a small town. My life is quiet. If that quiet is compromised, my children will bear the cost, and I will not subject them to that. I understand. But Arya looked up. Eels. But, Eanes continued, if a method exists to utilize my information without my name being attached, I will provide everything. I have the check. I have the card she provided. I have the name of the clinic and the physician and the date. Eels. And I have a letter she sent 6 months later, stating her expectation to never have contact with me again. I retained it all. I have kept it in a box under my bed for 11 years without knowing its purpose. Now I do. Arya's eyes were lacrimating. Eels. She made no move to wipe them. Thank you, she said. Withhold your thanks. Use it. I will use it, Arya stated, in a manner that does not transform you into her. Eanes' gaze sharpened at the statement. Eels. What? Yes, the subject heard the statement. The information was being conveyed because no one else would, and because the subject's mother. Here, Eanes paused, regulating her breath. Because, based on my analysis of your mother's profile, Eels, I believe she would articulate this if present. Individuals like Vivian Ashford are not formed in a vacuum. A significant past event was inflicted upon her, and she resolved to never again be the recipient of such an action. Eels. That is the theology of their pathology. Every last one of them. Do not replicate the pattern, Arya. Be the agent who halts the cycle, not the one who masters it. There is a distinction. It is a subtle distinction. It will define every day of your life. Eels. Min Arya did not respond for a considerable interval. I'll attempt to, she said finally. The attempt is the entirety of the work. Eels. They communicated for another hour on trivial matters, on Inez's children, on her husband, a mechanic, who remained unaware of these dynamics and for whom such knowledge was unnecessary, on the garden in the back, predominantly tomatoes, Eels, which she cultivated poorly but with great affective pride. When Arya rose to leave, Ons initiated a hug. The physical contact was brief. Neither subject displayed lacrimation. There was nothing aesthetic about it, Eels, and it was the most authentic physical interaction Arya had experienced with another female since her mother's death. At the door, Ens held her at arm's length. One additional datum, she said. Yes, Eels. Your mother did not sign those documents for monetary gain. I reviewed the settlement. I reviewed the waiver. Your father's family would have propagated the narrative that she forfeited his name's protection for currency. She did not, Eels. She signed as a condition of retaining custody of you. That was the singular term of the negotiation. They presented a significant financial offer for her to withdraw, which she refused. They then removed the financial incentive from the table, Eels, placed the document before her, and delivered an ultimatum. Sign this, or we will remove the child. And she signed. It is plausible your father was not aware of the terms being presented in this manner. Vivian was. Arya's hand gripped the doorframe. Eels. What is the source of this information? Because the legal counsel they engaged with her was the same counsel they engaged with me. And he disclosed it years later, Eels, in a state of inebriation at a conference in a different city, because guilt is a chronic affliction. I do not possess his formal statement. He is now deceased, Eels. But I possess the knowledge, and I accept its validity, and I have spent many years accepting it. Your mother did not sell you, Arya. She purchased you with the entirety of her available resources. Arya exhibited a cathartic response on the steps. Eels. Ines allowed it, held her briefly a second time, then gently directed her toward the street. Go, In said. Go and be her daughter. Arya departed. The return flight was quiet. Lucien did not inquire. Volov did not inquire. Arya stared out the window. Feels. Observing the landscape darken below, and at one point contemplated what Inns had said, the part concerning the woman who stops the cycle versus the woman who wins the game. She turned this concept over for the duration of the flight. She concluded, Feels, somewhere over a state she had never visited, that she wished to attempt to be both. Feels. She did not yet know if such a synthesis was possible. They landed at night. Kachaka had prepared soup. Arya consumed 2 bowls. She slept for 10 hours, and upon waking, she knew her course of action. She did not escalate to litigation. Feels. That was the primary decision, and the one that most surprised Lucien. It was also the decision that, in the ensuing weeks, incited quiet fury among a few of his lawyers. She did not take her father to court regarding the trust. Feels. She did not take Vivin to court over Inns. She did not take Reyes to court over any of it. She approached the board instead. Vance Holdings maintained a board of directors, 9 individuals. 4 were Gregory's close allies. 5 were not. Feels. Archie had spent 2 complete weeks with Lucien's lawyer, a woman named Helen Park, examining every board member's history, every filing, every public vote, every latent animosity. Feels. By the time Arya entered the boardroom on a Tuesday morning, she had secured the 5. She wore the dark green cis again. She was accompanied by Helen Park. She brought the trust documents. She brought a summary, in remarkably plain language, Feels, of the 9 years of withdrawals her father had executed from her mother's trust. She brought a sealed envelope with a notarized statement from Enzeron that did not bear Inns's name, but contained every relevant document from the container under her bed, Feels, including the check, the card, and the letter. She brought the medical records her father had sent to the law office, the true figure it would have cost to save her mother, Feels, and a summary of what Gregory had disbursed from the trust that same year for a yacht. She spoke for 23 minutes. She did not modulate her voice upward. She did not cry. Feels. She concluded by placing a single sheet of paper in the center of the long boardroom table. Feels. This, she stated, is my proposal. I am not requesting the board remove my father as chairman. I am not asking you to claw back what he has appropriated. I am asking for 3 things. 1. The trust effective today, Feels, is to be separated from any administration by any individual with the surname Vance. It will be transferred to an independent trustee. 2. A public apology written by him, in language I will personally review, acknowledging that my mother, Feels. Eleanor Cassidy was never offered the recognition or support she was owed, and that this was a failure on his part, not hers. 3. Vivian Ashford will quietly step down from the advisory committee she sits on in this company, Feels, effective within the month. No announcement will be necessary. Feels. The room was silent. The most senior board member, a man named Whitford, who had known Arya's mother in the distant past, cleared his throat. And if we decline? Then everything I possess in this folder, Arya said, Feels, goes to 3 reporters who have already solicited me for comment within the last week. I will not disseminate it in anger. I will not send it with commentary. I will allow the documentation to speak for itself. You know what it says, Feels. You have been examining it for 20 minutes. I am not asking for his chair, Mr. Whitford. I am asking for my mother's name, for my stepmother's quiet removal, and for the capital that is mine to be in hands that are not his. That is the extent of it, Feels. If the board agrees, none of this information leaves this room. That is also a component of the proposal. Whitford looked at the other members. The 5 she had selected returned his gaze. It took him, Arya observed, Feels, approximately 4 seconds to assess the power dynamics in the room. The board, he said, will take this under advisement until tomorrow morning. That's acceptable, Arya said. She stood. She thanked them for their time, Feels, a phrase she had rehearsed in a mirror and which was delivered with an even tone. She exited. In the hall, Helen Park looked at her. They are going to capitulate, Helen said. I know. You don't want the chair. I don't want the chair, Feels. The chair is a trap. I would have to occupy it for 20 years, feigning my father's role, and my father never performed a day of genuine work in his own company, Feels. I would prefer to construct something of my own. Astute. I had effective instructors this past month. They went outside. The vehicle was waiting. Arya entered and sat completely still for the entire journey home, Feels, because she had been maintaining a state of extreme physiological tension for 6 hours, and her body was now initiating a very slow process of release. The board said yes. It required 10 hours, not one. Feels. Whitford called her at 6 o'clock the next morning. He was carefully apologetic regarding certain procedural details. Arya accepted the details without comment. The trust was transferred within the week. Gregory wrote the apology. Feels. He revised it twice under her supervision, and the final version stated her mother's name 4 times in 4 sentences, and was, for a man like Gregory Vance, as close to a genuine expression of remorse as he was capable of producing. Feels. Vivian stepped down from the committee. There was no announcement. She executed it on a Tuesday morning via email, citing personal reasons. 3 days after Vivian's resignation, she transmitted a message to Arya. Was this necessary? Arya read it. Feels. She considered it for an hour. She wrote, with great care, yes, I am sorry that it was. I am not sorry that I did it. She pressed send. Vivian did not reply. They did not communicate again for a significant period. Feels. The situation with Anton Reyes proved to be simpler than any of them had projected, because Anton Reyes, as Lucienne had noted on the first night, was fond of his knees. The statement about Arya had performed its function. Feels. The photograph had performed a greater one. Feels. The trust transfer, which was private but not invisible to the correct observers, accomplished the rest. Reyes dispatched a man with a soft voice and a fine suit to Lucienne's house one afternoon. Feels. The man and Lucienne sat in the library for 45 minutes, and when the man departed, he shook Lucienne's hand. Gregory's debt was quietly restructured to Reyes's organization without Arya's name appearing on a single document. Reyes, Feels. Lucienne later explained, had agreed to withdraw from the marriage arrangement the instant he understood that Arya was not a transactional asset. Feels. And had agreed to a longer repayment schedule because the alternative for him was a conflict with a man he preferred not to engage. He is not a good man. Feels. Lucienne said, do not be deceived by the ease of this resolution. He is a practical man. That is different. Yes. Is that what you are? I am a practical man, Lucienne said, most days. On the best days, I am something marginally better than that. Feels. What is the best version of you, Lucienne? He observed her for a long moment. You will see it, I hope, if you are still present to see it. I told you, I am going to marry you. You did tell me. I have not altered my position. I have noticed. Feels. He told her the thing he had said he would tell her, 2 nights before the end of that month, in the library at a very early hour. It was not what she had anticipated. She had projected a homicide. She had projected a clandestine wife. Feels. She had anticipated a confession of wartime atrocity, some act committed in a territory she could not geographically place. What the subject delivered, however, was the mundane case history of his engagement with a benefactor 12 years prior. Feels. During a period of heightened desperation and underdeveloped risk assessment concerning sources of income, a single specific task was performed for this individual. Feels. While the full scope of the operation's objective was unknown to him at the time of acceptance, sufficient data existed for a negative evaluation. He accepted the payment regardless. Feels. This action was a contributing factor in the eventual systemic collapse of a small family unit in a city they no longer inhabit. Note, not their termination, but their ruin. The father experienced a catastrophic business failure. The mother, Feels, a corresponding decline in physical health. Feels. A male child, now 17 years of age, has been the beneficiary of an educational fund, quietly established by Lucian 9 years ago, through a foundation under a third-party designation. He presented this information without emotional inflection, Feels, offering no justifications or mitigations. He concluded the disclosure with a statement, "The family has no knowledge of my involvement. They will never have knowledge. I seek no credit. I am providing this data because if we proceed as you've outlined, Feels, you must be aware that a boy in this country has a college fund due to my actions stemming from a job I should have refused. This is a debt I will service for the remainder of my life. If this information prompts you to withdraw, Feels, I will make no attempt to prevent it." Arya processed the data for a prolonged period. "Will the debt ever feel fully serviced to you?" she inquired. "No." Good, good. If it ever felt concluded, Lucienne, Feels, I would know you had granted yourself absolution. Feels. I would choose an associate who will never feel his debt is settled over one who determines he has made sufficient restitution. He closed his eyes. Upon reopening them, she observed a shift in his expression for which she had no clinical term. "Okay, Feels," he said. "Okay." The union was formalized at the garden of the residence, a quiet proceeding. Attendees included Katya and Vulov, Helen Park, two of Lucian's long-term associates, and one of Arya's, Mia Heels, the barista from a Fifth Avenue coffee shop whom Arya, with Lucian's covert assistance, had methodically cultivated a friendship with that spring. Mia exhibited a strong emotional response during the vows, Heels, despite minimal familiarity with the bride and no prior contact with the groom. She was, as Arya had assessed, an individual prone to lacrimal responses at nuptial ceremonies, a stimulus response pattern akin to a floral allergy, Heels. The subject's maternal locket was secured inside the bodice of her dress. Heels, Gregory was not in attendance. Heels. She had engaged in a lengthy cost-benefit analysis regarding his invitation. Ultimately, she dispatched a letter, not an invitation, which stated, "My marriage ceremony will be on the 20th. You are not invited. I am willing to meet with you, alone, Heels, the following weekend." He responded affirmatively after 2 days. The meeting occurred. They sat in the same tea shop she had previously selected for a meeting with Vivian. For 90 minutes, they engaged in strained verbal exchange. Heels. He displayed one instance of crying, she displayed none. He concluded by inquiring if she would ever grant him forgiveness. She replied, "The outcome is uncertain. I will initiate the attempt. Not for your benefit, but for mine." Heels. Carrying this psychological weight is inefficient, and I have other loads I intend to carry. Heels. Resubmit the query in 1 year. He nodded. No physical contact was made. He meticulously settled the bill for both teas and departed. She did not return to her residence and cry. Heels. She returned and engaged in a prolonged ambulatory session in the garden, observing the late light on the hedges. By the time she re-entered the structure, she had achieved a state not of forgiveness for him. No, not yet, but something more stable. Heels. The realization that over the last year she had developed into a woman whose internal equilibrium was no longer dependent on him being a different man. She would analyze this distinction often in later years. Heels. How it was not synonymous with forgiveness. How it was, in many ways, superior. Forgiveness is a relational transaction. The state she had achieved required only the self. Esserin did not attend the ceremony either, but she transmitted a card. Heels. It was a small handwritten artifact containing a single sentence. "You did it without becoming her." Heels. Your mother would have loved you today. Arya stored the card in a box under her bed, a behavioral echo of Ans's own archival tendencies. The subsequent years were not characterized by simplicity or order. The company Arya founded, a small, Heels, discreet investment firm operating within a mostly ethical framework, a descriptor she no longer felt shame in using, grew at a rate slower than her accountants projected, but faster than her detractors anticipated. Heels. She engaged in conflict with Lucian, at times with significant intensity. She lost an early contract she should have secured, a failure attributed to excessive caution. Heels. She later secured a contract of much greater magnitude because she had deployed caution in a different, more strategic manner. She learned to differentiate between tactical caution and strategic risk. She accumulated enemies. Heels. Some of these she maintained, as certain adversaries provide a useful function. Others she disengaged from, classifying them as resource-draining and not worth the upkeep. She discovered, over time, a specific innate talent. Heels. It was not the skill she had predicted. It was not the analysis of group dynamics in a room. She could perform that function, yes, but it was a learned skill. It was not the selection of assets. She performed that function as well. Heels. The talent that proved to be intrinsically hers, the one no one had taught her, was an acute ability to identify young women who had been underestimated by their familial units and to provide them with capital before they had developed self-worth. Heels. 5 such subjects in the first 2 years, 11 by the 5th. Heels. By the 10th year, the number approached 40. The operation was not public. Her name was not attached to the fund. It was administered quietly through Helen Park's office. The beneficiaries were not always aware of the money's origin. Heels. This was acceptable to her. It was, in fact, the objective. Because what her mother had bequeathed her, Arya had finally processed, was not wealth. Her mother had given her a specific, stubborn, Heels, unperformative resolve to retain a child the world had advised her to discard. The only methodology Arya could devise to replicate that act was to perform it quietly, frequently, and over a prolonged duration. She did not, in the end, become Vivian. Heels. She had allocated enough cognitive resources to the fear of becoming Vivian that the not becoming became a daily practice. Heels. And practices she had learned at some point were more reliable constructs than promises. She engaged in the practice daily. On some days she failed. On those days, she reported the failure to Lucian, and Lucian, who maintained his own set of practices, would nod. In the morning, they would both resume their work. Vivian Ashford survived for another 11 years. She and Arya had contact on 3 occasions during that period, twice at funerals for non-family members. The third time was at a gallery opening Arya had not known Vivian would be attending. They acknowledged each other with a nod. They did not speak. At the end of the evening, as Arya was departing, Vivian intercepted her near the coat check and said, very quietly, "The girl in the green dress in the paper all those years ago." That subject was no longer you by then, was it? Arya processed the question. "No," she confirmed. "That was the initial version. There have been others. This iteration is the one I am retaining for the foreseeable future." Vivian nodded. She said, "Good," with a tone that was neither kind nor cruel, and then she put on her coat and left. Arya observed her departure. She did not experience triumph. She did not experience grief. She experienced the strange, flat effect of having outgrown a psychodrama she had once perceived as her entire reality. Oddly, it was Celeste with whom Arya eventually established something approaching a stable connection. Not friendship. Celeste was never going to be a friend. But in her late 20s, Celeste had exited the Vance household, relocated across the country, and initiated an autonomous life. She had written Arya a long letter the year after, apologizing for numerous minor transgressions Arya had nearly forgotten and a few major ones she had not. Arya had replied with caution, and they maintained a written correspondence for nearly a decade. Celeste married poorly, divorced, married better, and produced one child. She named the child Eleanor. She inquired in a letter if this was acceptable. Arya experienced a cathartic emotional release for 1 hour, wrote back confirming it was, and served as the girl's godmother in a limited capacity for the rest of her life. Gregory Vance expired in the 12th year after the gala. The death was not unexpected. He had been ill for some time. Arya had visited him during the final 6 months with greater frequency than she had anticipated. They did not achieve intimacy. They achieved at the end a state approximating civility. During the last visit, the day before he died, he held her hand for a long period without speaking. At one point, he verbalized, "Your mother," but did not complete the sentence. He looked at her with an expression that, after a moment of consideration, she elected to interpret as the apology he had never successfully articulated. She said, "I know, Dad." He closed his eyes. She remained until the night nurse arrived. At the funeral, she delivered a short eulogy. It was not a laudatory speech. It was also not a cruel one. She stated that her father was a complicated man who had caused significant harm and some quiet good. She stated that she had spent much of her life in a state of anger toward him, and that in the final months she had been attempting, imperfectly, to set the anger down. She clarified that setting it down was not the same as saying he had not earned it. She said she was setting it down because the psychological cost of carrying it had begun to exceed its value, and that she believed her mother, who had been a practical woman, would have approved of the calculation. She did not cry during the speech. She cried later, alone in the car with Lucian sitting beside her, not speaking. The subjects eventually produced 2 offspring. The first, a daughter, was named Eleanor, a repetition of the maternal subject's own name, suggesting a disregard for convention driven by an observable compulsion on Arya's part. A son followed 2 years later, named by Lucien for a maternal grandfather he'd never met, a name discovered accidentally in his late 20s via discarded correspondence. The children's development occurred within the Stones, which had transitioned from Lucian's property to a shared domestic space. By Arya's own evaluation, their upbringing was imperfect. No childhood is, but it was an environment where the presence of parental affection was never in question, a baseline she had established early as her fundamental duty. On the subject's 45th birthday, Arya was observed sitting on the steps of the stone house with Lucian. A small social gathering was in progress inside, composed primarily of their core social unit. Katya remained present, her age manifesting in reduced mobility, though she still rejected any formal title. Volkov, despite having retired 3 years prior, predictably maintained his routine of Sunday visits. Mia now operated her own urban bakery, an enterprise financed by a lone Arya facilitated after an initial rejection by the financial institution. Helen Park, having achieved a spectacular promotion to partner, was noted engaging in a debate with one of Lucian's nephews regarding wine deals. Lucian provided Arya with a glass of water, a behavior indicating a long-term learned response to her preference over champagne for this occasion. Deals. 30 minutes of isolation, he stated. Then a return to the group. A deal was struck. A period of non-verbal communication ensued. The garden was saturated with residual summer light, deals, and a moth was observed making futile attempts to engage with a lamp near the door. From within the house, the laughter of the daughter Eleanor was audible, likely a response to a remark from Volkov, deals, who consistently elicited this reaction from her more than any other individual. Arya's thoughts, a common pattern on quiet evenings, reverted to the girl in the navy dress, deals. The adolescent who stood at the periphery of the Hartley Ballroom 22 years ago, fixating on the chandeliers as a coping mechanism to avoid social interaction. The girl with trembling hands, the girl on the verge of being commodified, deals. She contemplated this past self and experienced the recurring thought, 1,000 times recorded, I would retrieve her if I could, deals. Then came the cognitive correction, a practiced mental sequence. She reminded herself it wasn't necessary. That version of herself had enacted her own extraction. That girl had accepted a stranger's hand, a high-risk, deals. Statistically foolish action that proved to be the correct one. The distinction between those two classifications was a variable only she could have calculated in that moment. It was that girl, her past self, who was the agent of her salvation, deals, not Lucienne, not even her mother. That girl, she sometimes thinks, is the basis for the single piece of advice she would offer a young woman on the edge of a ballroom. You will not be rescued, not in any meaningful sense, deals. A hand might be offered to you, and sometimes taking it is the right move, and sometimes the outcome will be positive, deals. But the act of taking is the salient event. The individual who takes it is the persona you must inhabit for the remainder of your life. No one else will perform that function for you. A benevolent or malevolent man can alter the physical space you occupy, deals, but neither can determine if you are the type of woman who traverses that space or the type who remains at its edge. That agency is yours. It was always yours. It will always be yours. She had articulated this once, deals, during a speech to a small group of women she was funding, and one of them, very young from a small town, her voice unsteady, had asked afterward, "Are you saying we have to do it alone?" Arya considered the question, deals. "No," she replied. "I'm stating that we are not permitted to do it alone, but we are also not permitted to bypass the part where we ourselves do it. Both conditions are simultaneously true. I received aid. You will receive aid. But you must also decide, deals, in a single specific moment, that you will reject the identity the room has assigned to you. That moment will be brief. It will not seem significant at the time. It will feel like a second where two paths are available, deals, and you choose the more difficult one. That second is the entire mechanism. There will be other sense later, but that initial one, that first one is the point of entry. Everything that follows is the structure built from it, deals. She hadn't been aware, as she said it, that she was merely documenting her own case history. The realization came later, in bed, listening to the sound of Lucian's breathing beside her, the wind outside, deals, and one of the children shifting in a room down the hall. She understood then that she had constructed the exact life the girl in the navy dress did not know she was permitted to desire, deals. The most peculiar aspect of it all was that this life hadn't made her safe. It had made her something superior to safe. It had made her a person for whom safety was no longer a required condition. On the steps on her 45th birthday, deals, she rested her head for a moment against Lucien's shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked. It was his annual query on this night, a behavior learned from the observation that she often failed to recognize her own contentment unless prompted. "Yes, deals," she said. "Deals. I believe I am." "Good," Lucien said. "Thank you. For what? For the initial night? For the key? Or for the circuitous route home? For preventing me from becoming her? You prevented yourself." "I know," deals. "But you created the conditions that made prevention possible. That is different. That is significant." He paused before answering. Then, very quietly, he said, "You made the same possible for me, in case that was unknown to you." She had known, deals, but the verbal confirmation was valuable. They remained for the balance of the 30 minutes. Then they rose, their movements stiff with age, and re-entered the house. Eleanor was now at the piano, attempting a piece she had not yet mastered but would, deals, eventually, deals. The boy was on the floor, constructing something with blocks alongside Volkov, who lay on his side beside him like a large, patient canine. Katya was in the kitchen, affecting a lack of interest while observing them all from the doorway. Heels. Helen had evidently won her argument about the wine. For a second, Arya stood in the hallway, surveying the room of people and experiencing for the 100th time the profound improbability of her circumstances. How close she had come, Heels, on a Tuesday night in a navy dress, to becoming a footnote in a transaction between others. How narrow the threshold she had passed through had been. How narrow the threshold she had now become for other women to pass through. Heels. She placed her hand on Lucienne's back, a light touch. She walked into the room. Heels. Her position was exactly where she was standing. In the final analysis, this was not a throne, nor was it a crown. It was not a royal title. It was a room of individuals she had selected, and who had selected her in return. A life she had constructed by choosing repeatedly for 22 years to be the version of herself the world had insisted she was not allowed to be. It was, in every way that was functionally important, enough. It was, in every way that was functionally important, complete.